some of the people can be trained. Some of these people don't have to.
Oh, if these go in tandem, so that one can plug into this. Testing. One.
Are you comfortable? I'm sorry. You want to just sit down here? I didn't. Should I be?
No. We have the approval, consider the approval of the minutes of June 3rd and June 5th that were given to you last week. Are there any changes, corrections, additions, or deletions from the minutes?
Not having read them, I agree with them.
Yeah, I would like to get a copy.
Sherry's moved as for approval as submitted, seconded by Joe Sheffield. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
So ordered.
Can I be an appearance request? Can I be an appearance request?
The appearance request for commissioners comes down on the commissioner's comments.
Oh, I just wanted a copy of the Rowan Group report.
Oh, well, just hand it to me. And
Pat,
have you got a copy for Lisa? It's a great Rowan group gotten around.
I think we have no appearance requests, and we have no unfinished business except the charter, so we'll go from here into committee reports. Charter Production Committee first. Mr. Josephson and Mrs. Holmes.
This report will be made in two parts because I infer that Sherry presided at the meeting I could not attend. What we're trying to do here is to take up Articles 1 through 6 tonight, do another bunch of articles next week, and then complete this kind of review the week after. So all of the items that are recommended by the Charter Production Committee, or which highlight policy issues that we see for your determination with no recommendation from the committee, are before you in writing. There may still be other areas of the first 6 articles that commissioners may want to bring up on their own motion, but this is what we found as requiring a report.
This is your committee report number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Joe, we've gone through 907
In the
in the committee meeting.
Okay, but I think only tonight we've got material on 1 through.
Well, let's get as far as we can tonight. If we can cover everything that we covered here before, let's do it.
This goes through two sections.
Yeah, and look at the bottom page of what they gave you. It's 907.
Well, okay, we'll go get into it and it'll just.
Where are we
Okay.
starting?
Okay, look at committee report number 1.
Okay.
There was a comment in the committee that perhaps the charter preamble should refer to, use the phrase under God or something of that nature. The committee didn't recommend that change, but the report is before you in case the commission wants to consider that or some other preamble issue. I also noticed that the Rowan report apparently, I don't know, does that constitute a suggestion? Contains a suggested revision of the preamble.
What is the procedure you're going to use here, Jen? Are we just going to read this through and that's final after we get through with it? Is that the idea?
Well,
I think that in this version that the phrase that was suggested by Mike is here if we wish it, in order to eliminate waste and duplication in government.
Do we want to use the word eliminate? Minimize, isn't it? We want to minimize waste and duplication. Eliminate? Our charter can't eliminate anything.
Sure can try.
You can try.
You can try, but hold it to minimum. Minimize. Who's kidding who on this? In a bureaucracy, you're always going to have duplication.
I think that we'd be
well, the procedural matter, I think one, if the committee report is desired, then a simple way to handle it for the secretary, from the secretary's point of view, is just to move that the committee report be adopted and have that vote carried, and then all the written material instructs the secretary as to what to do in terms of charter
revision.
Okay, I move the committee report number 1 be adopted by the commission.
Second?
Seconded. Now is there a discussion regarding?
In effect, that means that we would leave the preamble as it was.
As it is written here.
In the first,
As it is written.
Joe, this committee report is a revised committee report number 1 and contains the suggested change
Okay.
in wording.
well, then this should have been done differently.
Is there any discussion on committee report 1?
Committee,
Am I correct in assuming committee report 1 is the preamble suggested by the one report?
No, not quite.
Not quite.
preamble of the charter, first draft, reads as follows.
The suggestion, the nearest we've come to his suggestion is that second phrase, in order to eliminate waste and duplication in government. The rest of it is almost the same.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Sherry?
the Rowan report refers to neighborhood control of neighborhood affairs, and committee like local control rather than getting right down to neighborhood control. And essentially, it is the same
With the two added phrases.
as the original preamble, except that the phrase "to eliminate waste and duplication in government" was added, and the forming more responsive government was moved in its position.
Okay, so
So the committee is recommending adoption, Sherry, of this one that's here, that starts with "we" and ends with "charter"?
Yes.
well, this is new to me, but that's all right.
Sounds good to me, except for that eliminate.
I think it's a good goal.
Sounds good, but the word eliminate bothers me.
That sounds reasonable. I was talking to myself.
Mr. Chairman,
Sherry?
we speak to the goal that we wish to attain, and we wish to eliminate all waste. And I think that whenever you're setting goals, you set the highest possible goals, realizing that with our human frailties, we sometimes fall short of those. But to say minimize is to
Admitting that
admit
waiting.
defeat before you even get started.
Yeah.
Any questions been called? You want to go roll call
Well, I think you,
unless
Yes, sir.
there's an objection? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? So ordered.
okay. The committee report number 2 proposes to add a sentence under boundaries, that the boundaries may be altered in the manner provided by law. There are really two considerations, I think. One was that, as the Rowan report reflects, there's a lot of confusion both in Eagle River and elsewhere as to whether the adoption of the charter would prejudice the separation movement before the local boundary commission by people in Eagle River. So that this language may have some helpful political effect in that regard. The second thing I think is that there had been some concern that an annexation might be a boundary change, and that without this language, an actual charter amendment would have to accompany the annexation. I think our attorney doesn't think that would be true under the weight of authority, but the additional language would clarify that.
That's right. I think, as a matter of law, the constitutional scheme for changing boundaries would prevail, and that, of course, is the boundary commission route. Nevertheless, for reassurance, this might be useful.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve.
Second.
Report.
Moved and seconded to approve the committee report number 2. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Call. Following the same format. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? There being no opposition, the secretary will be instructed to cast a unanimous vote for adoption.
Okay. Now, number 3, powers. The only change would be to make Section 201 read, "The municipality may exercise all legislative powers not prohibited by law or by this charter." Again, law is defined to include the charter, but we were getting comments in the public hearings that we were providing for a government of unlimited powers, and the addition of the phrase avoids that kind of inference.
I move for its adoption.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Adoption of committee report number 3, Article 2, Section 201, powers.
Question.
Question is called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? There being no opposition, the committee report is adopted and the secretary instructed to cast a unanimous ballot.
Mr. Chairman, could we pause for
Sherry?
1 moment? And this machine, I thought that you had to push these 2 levers down in order to get it to actually record.
Is it on start?
It's on start. It's playing. Is it recording?
Yeah.
Keep the thing out there, society.
Good work, Pat. You saved the day.
Thanks, Fred.
Special merit badge for that.
Mr. Joseph?
Okay. Number 4, on the initiative and referendum.
About
3A.
3A, I'm sorry, on the initiative and referendum. In the public hearings, there was some criticism that we had not followed precisely the initiative and referendum provisions in the state law. Mr. Garnett maybe wants to speak to this. His comments are contained on page 2. Under our charter, the referendum actually suspends the operation of an ordinance, and under state law, that is not correct. That suspension does not happen. With that in mind, and further because a tendency of an initiative effort could affect the marketability of bonds if the initiative could extend to bonds, and other problems arise in just the working of government. The committee recommends that there be no change in that language. We have sort of certified to you this policy question, whether the ordinances in light of the public comment whether an ordinance should be susceptible to an initiative or referendum where mill levy is fixed or where municipal bonding is involved. The committee's recommendation is to leave it alone and not extend the initiative and referendum to right now, as you'll recall, budgets, mill levies, bond authorization, and appropriations are excluded from the initiative and referendum.
Is there...
If there's no desire to change, then nothing needs to be done.
I would think that we should adopt the committee report.
I'll move for its adoption. That makes sense.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Parsons. Mr. Chai. Yes.
I understand the question related to the acceptability of bonds, but I'm not sure that I've been convinced by the committee that ordinances related to mill levies should not be subject to referendum. Could a member of the committee enlighten me on the discussion surrounding that issue?
Mr. Chairman, I think that the discussion in relation to mill levies was that were it possible to hold up government by making a referendum or initiative in relation to a mill levy, that you could disrupt the government for about 60 days after every time you tried to set a budget. And you could set a new budget, and then it could be disrupted for the next 60 days, and you might end up with a year that you had nothing but disruption. I think that the way to control mill levies and budgets and appropriations is by recalling the assemblymen if they don't suit you when they set a budget, rather than by recalling the budget. And if you recall the assemblyman, because they set up on budget, I think you'll get a new set of assemblymen right quick that will take care of reappropriation.
Mary, can you refresh my memory on the required number of people for recall and the required number of people for referendum?
Well, the referendum
It's not
was,
Two or three, and
Referendum, you have to have people sign, right?
recall.
yeah,
Percentage of.
I think it's 10% in referendum, 25 and 15 for recall, depending on whether you're at large or...
25 and 50 in recall and 10 in referendum. Well,
I'm trying to find it here in our, at least 10% of the voters for referendum, for initiative. The recall is 25% of the voters in a individual district, and 15% if it's an at-large, or I don't think we spoke to whether a multiple man would do the same as at large.
okay.
Sucker.
If it's from a district, we say 25%, and then 15% if it's at large for a recall. But that is, we've spoken to that a little farther along, and that is the number that voted in that district in the last regular election.
Okay, then
Recall would be 10.
your solution to the particular problem that citizen might face would be recall, which is more difficult to achieve than referendum.
It possibly,
Well,
no, it's 10% of the voters who cast the ballot at the last rate. Yes, it is more difficult.
it's more difficult. I don't think the question is one of, it's not a solution. In fact, I doubt that the suggestion of recall is offered as a solution. It's not really a solution. But the alternative is the sort of
It's
parade of
chaos.
horrors that
It's
Mary referred to, that the budget would be set, then nobody could plan for the fiscal year. Is that correct? Mary? Because the thing would be in a state of suspension.
It would be chaos, I believe, effectively.
Question.
Mr. Chairman, Rick, am I right in reading that we can give mill levies and stuff like that? They can be such referendum initiatives if we say so? Yes.
Yeah.
Are you sure that the 29 allows mill levies to be referendum?
Well, Title 29,
There's a pretty good discussion of this in the committee report on the second page that tells you.
noted. The only question is whether the constitutional language by direct effect would limit municipal initiatives and referenda.
Yeah, that's
The
the question.
constitutional language is much more limited. It refers to appropriations, but it doesn't refer to mill levies specifically.
Well, appropriations are, the state doesn't use mill levies for appropriations,
Right.
but the local government does. And if we include appropriations, then we are, in effect, affecting mill levies.
Well, yeah.
Definitely affect the mill
You got
levy.
at least a two-stage question, Mary. It's an initial question whether the constitutional limitations apply automatically to local government referenda. I'm not really sure they do because, as you point out, they seem to be directed toward a whole different type of situation. And then, of course, the second question would be whether Title 29 made that provision applicable to us, and it does not specifically. So I think we have a pretty, theoretically, we would have considerable leeway in deciding what subjects would be subject to referenda in this charter if we wanted to.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's another alternative, I think, and that is that if you wanted to open up these areas to referendum and initiative, you can consider doing so without the suspension effect, correct? I mean, if the argument is one of
Right.
chaos, that still creates a problem in the bond market.
Yes, it does.
But that would be an option the commission considered.
I'm sorry,
You
I
see,
didn't
if you-
understand what you said.
Well, the problem is
Move the suspension.
that we had testimony saying that we were more restrictive as to the referendum and initiative than the state was, but that testimony overlooked the fact that we are giving immediate suspension effect to a referendum, which stays the operation of an ordinance. Now, if we wanted to depart from that and not provide that stay, we could go back, we could liberalize the language, is what I'm saying, as another alternative way of doing it.
In other words,
But the pendency of an initiative, whether an official stay was existing or not, would still throw bond sales into
the mill levy, in some cases, though in most is not true, in some cases, is repaid by a mill levy. And if you don't have this sort of thing on the mill levy, some kinds of bonds will be in trouble. But most of the bonds are repaid by assessments, which controlling the mill levy would not affect, as I understand it.
Well, a general obligation bond, pardon me, but general obligation bonds goes to the mill levy, whether that's the ultimate
Yeah, that's the ultimate recourse.
recourse.
If the desired effect is to allow, let's say, for a referendum on the mill levy, if we follow the procedures that we've set out now in this section, and if our fiscal year is in the calendar year and the mill levy is set sometime just prior to that, then any referendum petition would be filed, and as I read, 202B, the election on that referendum would not be held until the next general election, which is at least 45 days after the filing of the petition, and the next general election might not be until October the following year. And so you would have one whole year in which before the referendum is voted on, or might have. And at that time, if the referendum passed and it did overturn the mill levy, where would you be? I think you'd be in chaos.
This tells us something right there. In 202, we should have the next general or special election held at least 45 days after it, so that if it were a referendum that had bad effect for it to hold over sometime almost a year, we could have a special election
No,
and
we
take
do.
care of it.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, we distinguish in 202B, I believe, between the initiative and the referendum in this regard, that an initiative is not voted upon until the next general election.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Referenda,
Referendum is
special or general within 75.
I'm sorry, I misread that.
Mr. Chairman,
Jane?
I don't know how to word it. I leave this up to legal counsel, but I strongly feel that the most central issue about government in the minds of voters is taxes, and that if there's any way that it's possible to allow a referendum on setting a mill levy or budgets, and I would exclude bonds, understanding the sellability of bonds and what all that has to do with it. I don't know if it's possible, but if it holds things up for 45 days, I don't think that's all that bad. It's the feeling that I have, and I'm probably a minority on this.
You have 75 days.
Mr. Parsons?
I don't doubt that it's possible for it to word it and to phrase the thing so it's a charter. But because I think we're trying to state a charter for the orderly flow of government,
Right.
rather than the disruptive, jerky kind of government process, I really think that we are creating a better vehicle without this kind of provision on mill levy.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other question. It might be possible to make a phrase in here that would allow budgets to be subject to referendum, exclusive of mill levies in relation to bonds be subject to it.
Lisa?
I had a question. If I wanted to take out a referendum on the mill levy from Muldoon, now, it would be voted on by everybody, but if it was decided that the people in Muldoon wanted their mill levy dropped from 5 to 2.5, everybody would vote on it? And I would have to get 10% of
Whole town.
everybody living in town.
Well,
Difficult question.
Mr. Chairman, I support the committee report. I've studied the testimony, and I just don't think it's workable. I mean, we have a representative system of government. I think Mrs. Froney's remarks went to the remedy, which is whether it's recall or not, is a political remedy, both in the selection of the people who set the mill levy. There are elaborate hearing processes before the mill levies are set. And then there's always the remedy of removing someone who is confiscatory or unreasonable in the way he approaches the matter of local taxation. But to open that up in an emotional way to special interests, to just and hold that over the elected officials as a threat to confuse and disorganize the government, I think is very
it's
dangerous.
wrong.
I think the committee has well researched this, and I think we're beating a dead dog. I agree with Jim that we want an orderly thing. Based on that, I'll call for the question.
Right. Question has been called. Must have
The question on the adoption of the committee report.
adoption of the committee report.
Yes.
Was there a motion, Mr. Chairman? I think, I'm not sure what Jane and Lisa thought they had a amending motion on the floor.
No, there isn't
move
one.
anything. I
No.
made it still.
No, there's no motion.
The motion on the floor, as I understood it, was to
Approved.
approve the committee report.
Committee report, right. That's all it's on, and that's what I'm calling for the question on.
Question has been called. And I guess we best go on a roll call basis on this. I don't have a roll in front of me. Have you a roll? All right.
No.
Shy,
Yes.
Fisher, oh, sorry, Roney,
Yes?
Holmes,
Yes.
Josephson,
Yes.
Parker,
No.
Parsons. Yes. Reed,
Yes.
Sheffield,
Yes.
Herculeski, yes.
Motion 1, 2, 3. Motion passes. The committee report 3A is adopted. Mr. Josephson, committee report 4.
Mr. Chairman, committee report number 4 is principally a matter of style. The old language from the testimony we had seemed to suggest to certain readers of the charter that the petition for referendum was valid only if it was filed within 60 days from the effective date of the ordinance or resolution. What we had intended was that the operation to stay the effect of the ordinance or resolution would apply only if the referendum was sought within 60 days. So the new language just, we hope, will clarify that. It's not meant to be a
Move for
substantive
approval,
change.
Mr. Chairman.
moved by Mr. Froney, second by Mr. Parsons. Approval of the committee report number 4, hearing Article 2202. Is there any discussion?
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? There being no opposition and second secretary be instructed to cast a unanimous report for adoption of committee report number 5. Report number 4. Next is committee report number 5, Article 203, power.
The original charter had a gap because someone appointed to fill a vacancy in an elected office was not subject to recall because he was not an elected official. The underlying addition would close that gap and subject that person to the possibility of recall.
Underlining is a person appointed to fill a vacancy may be recalled as if he had been elected in the same manner as his elected predecessor.
That's correct. I move for approval of report number 5.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Josephson, second by Mr. Froney. Adoption of committee report number 5.
Mr. Chairman, Pat's out. For Pat's information to note, it should be is 15%, not if 15%. A type error in there, Pat.
I'm sorry.
Typographical area, in case of a large office, the required percentage is, not if, 15%.
Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the whole percentage be 15%. That, so we have the 25% to move that to 15% and delete the part about at-large office.
What are you saying?
Yeah, well,
Drop 25.
Drop 25 to what, to 15?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Froney?
I'd like to answer that. I don't wish to second it. If it were in a district, you might have 200 votes cast. 2,000 votes cast. 25% not far off. That's the reason for the difference. So it would take about the same number of people to recall almost any assemblyman, whether he was from a district or at large.
Mr. Chairman, in the second sentence, the phrase excluding a runoff election is new material.
Yeah, this is true. I was not sure how much of this had been. Maybe we should speak to this. There is new language, as Bill pointed out. The addition of the language excluding a runoff election was intended to avoid keying the necessary percentage to an election at which an abnormally small number of people voted, as we've seen in recent runoff elections. The whole effort, when we initially started trying to clarify this section, the problem had to do with a situation where we had multi-member districts with differing numbers of persons elected from the several districts, so that if the standard were simply the last election, theoretically there could be a district in which no one was elected at the last election, and therefore the required percentage to recall would be none. We did discuss this at some length and finally hit upon this fairly elaborate language, I suppose, tying the required percentage to the number of votes cast in the last municipal election, other than a runoff, at which this particular official to be recalled was a candidate. The other changes are, I think, purely stylistic, in that the long sentence was broken down, I believe, at Ms. Angus' suggestion, into 3 shorter sentences.
Is there any further discussion?
I'll call for the question.
Question been called. And as much as there seems to be some objection, we'll have roll call on it.
This is the amendment from
This is the committee report.
We didn't have an amendment, we didn't second it.
There was no second. No.
There wasn't a second. I wanted to explain, I didn't wish to second.
Start with Chai,
Yes.
Roney,
Yes?
Holmes, Josephson,
Yes.
Harper,
Yeah.
Parsons,
He had to leave.
myself, yes. Sheffield?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do I get to vote?
Huh?
Do I get to vote?
You skipped her.
Yeah, I started out second on Ankvik.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. The committee report number 5 has been adopted by unanimous vote. Those voting. Committee report number 6.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like Mr. Garnett to, and others of the committee, to assist me on this because this is rather complicated. But in the original 301, we provided for mandatory reapportionment at least once every 10 years. Here, the procedure is somewhat different. We provide that every 10 years, that is, after the federal decennial census is furnished to the borough, the Assembly must determine and declare by resolution whether or not it is malapportioned. And it has to do that within 30 days from the date that material is available. And it must also make that determination upon receipt of a petition of 50 or more qualified voters alleging and containing reliable evidence that the Assembly is malapportioned, which might be at more frequent intervals than 10 years. If the Assembly determines that it is malapportioned, then it has 5 months to reapportion itself in the manner provided by law. The whole procedure would be subject to judicial review. And in this rewriting of 301, we, on page 2, kind of indicate at least three policy issues that this paragraph raises. One is whether the Commission wants to adhere to what it did before and simply require reapportionment every 10 years, or do it the way the rewriting would do it, which is to have a decision by the Assembly at those periodical intervals and on petition as well by voters to declare whether or not it's apportioned properly, and from that declaration there could be judicial review. The second question that was raised had to do with contiguity, the requirement that an Assembly election district be contiguous, and there are some legal implications in that Mr. Garnett should speak to. And then the third thing that came up in our meetings was that in this reapportionment, even if the voters approve in August 1975 a single-member philosophy or a multi-member philosophy or whatever they may do, the question arises as to whether the charter should allow for the Assembly in the reapportionment process to change that philosophy, or whether there should be some specific procedure inserted if there is going to be a change in the philosophy. Rick, do you want to speak to that? As to the third, we didn't really provide anything, but we just do cite the question to you. Why don't you say?
All right, Joe. I'm trying to pick out this and where the question would emerge from the narrative. There is a new sentence here based on action of the subcommittee of the committee this afternoon. I believe Arliss raised the question of whether the Assembly should have the power to reapportion itself on its own motion, in addition to the two occasions that we had set out earlier, that is the federal census and the receipt of a petition. We did put in...
I think as to that, though, in our earlier discussion, we thought that the Assembly could certainly get 50 voters to bring the occasion about it.
Well, I'd say that was discussed today, and the decision of the subcommittee this afternoon, as I understood it, was that they wanted, at least for discussion purposes, to have this new sentence or something to that effect, which says the assembly at any time may determine and declare whether or not it is malapportioned. So that is an addition to be considered. Also, in accordance with discussion at the last meeting, there is a phrase including any supplementary data necessary to establish population distribution. This borrows from the statutory language and recognizes the fact that the census reports come in very incomplete and sort of sporadic form, and we're not going to start any time running until what they need is there.
Again, if I want to stop for just a second, in reference to that, we have to change the word borough.
Yes. Municipality or Anchorage.
Within Anchorage, or within,
Change it to commune.
I like that.
Which do we want, municipality?
Thank
How about commune? I like that.
you.
Yeah, call it a commune.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we substitute municipality for borough.
Jeff seconded that we substitute municipality for borough.
Mr. Chairman, I thought, well, I thought we were going to use Anchorage whenever we could.
Huh?
I thought we were going to use Anchorage when we could.
Good point.
that sounds funny, though.
What?
That sounds funny.
I think
It doesn't sound sufficiently weighty.
You would certainly want to use the word Anchorage wherever you were trying to convey the personality of the place, maybe, when you're talking about it in the abstract.
Is there any further discussion?
I'll withdraw my objection.
No objections being withdrawn, we'll follow the procedure of going for a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, so ordered.
Can I ask who gave the motion second?
Mary
I think I moved. I moved
Seconded.
and Sherry
for
seconded.
amendment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have a main motion on the floor? to
Yes, we
adopt
do.
the-
We have a main motion to adopt the committee report.
You're going to keep talking.
Who made that second?
I'll do it.
I'll second it.
Joe
Okay.
I forgot my idea, but I don't know.
and Mary.
It doesn't matter.
Jane?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we should provide for a vehicle as the question is raised in number 3 out of page 2 about whether or not the Assembly should require an extraordinary vote as opposed to just a simple majority vote to change the method of distribution within the borough on the basis that it was malapportioned. But it would seem to me that we have also given the legislative body the right to alter whether it's single member or multi-member districts, regardless of whether they're malapportioned. Do we want to do that, and if so, do we want to create a mechanism for doing that with more than a simple majority? I think we do.
Mr. Chairman, I have been thinking about this, and I think really what we want to do is to put in the charter that whenever there is a suggestion of changing the method of districting, that the people should be allowed to vote to choose between the two, and not only give them one choice on the ballot.
I have a question, though. If you put one apportionment on the ballot and it fails, what happens?
If you go with this, what
Especially
happens
the assembly with no apportionment.
Sure. Lisa, the way it works is, at the present time, we as a home rule municipality are subject to the state statute on this subject. If, upon the determination that the assembly is malapportioned, the assembly fails to reapportion itself within 6 months, the Department of Community and Regional Affairs does it.
Okay, but
if it was just put, if the borough wasn't malapportioned, and they just wanted to reapportion, then if it failed with the old intent,
Mr. Chairman, I have a fairly serious question. I think about the meaning of this in light of what Lisa said. I'm not sure that this language does permit any reapportionment without a finding of malapportionment. And that's, I suppose, a policy consideration for the Commission. I think this language says if the Assembly determines that it is malapportioned, it shall reapportion itself, and the Assembly shall be reapportioned whenever it becomes malapportioned. Does not seem to me to permit
Changing representative.
reapportionment without malapportionment.
Well,
At least it could be argued.
Sherry?
Mr. Chairman, I just think as a matter of policy, we ought to discourage the government from changing its form.
Do we provide a mechanism for citizens to request that the method of districting be changed?
Sure. Initiative. Well, but
That's a long one, though. That takes a year.
it's easy. I think the control is probably political. I mean, experience indicates that legislative bodies don't change the method by which they were elected
Themselves.
Yeah, on their own motion.
Next time, give 2 election times, it would be beneficial to be in a different kind of setup.
Well, so I mean, I'm not saying that's not possible, but you won't be doing this. You won't have legislators doing this capriciously.
The problem is the age of experience most recently has been changed every year for the last 3 years. So that people are getting used to using their method of choosing representatives.
Mr. Chairman, the thing that bothers me is when they're only given one choice on the ballot. In other words, they're not really given a choice. And this is what has happened the last 2 times. And this is one reason why I wonder if we don't want to put a sentence in here that says if the type of representation by district or at large is proposed for change, that the people be given a choice of more than one method.
Is
In other
present
words,
time, we have no prohibition on an ordinance being introduced that would change the method of representation. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman?
I suspect that what we have here
Is this problem. We don't have a word for what we're talking about, and therefore we don't have any language for it. I mean, in the report on page 2, we refer to that as a matter of districting philosophy. We discussed whether this is a matter of reapportionment, redistricting, composition, and we never really found a term that we could use as a label for what it is we're trying to protect against. If we had that term, I think we might agree with Mrs. Froney's suggestion or some other suggestion to involve the voters directly.
Mr. Chairman, I think, though as purists we would like to have words to identify each of these concepts, a court, it seems to me, would call a change from single member to multi-member or vice versa a reapportionment for purposes of the statutory requirement that there be a vote on that change.
So you're saying that it would have to be submitted to the people?
Yeah, I don't think we
Yes.
have any change.
But
what I'm speaking to,
We don't say that. We don't say that's the vote for a vote.
We're bound by the statute, which
But
Mary wants
Mrs.
to-
Froney's point was that it would go not in the context of another alternative.
no, I understand.
I want to be sure that if it's ever put to the vote again, that the folks still are given an alternative and are not just said, say yes or no, period, or else it goes to the Boundary Commission. I want the folks to be given an alternative, a true alternative, so they have something to choose from, not only a yes or no choice.
Mr. Chairman, maybe the solution to this is a political solution again, in that this does go to hearing,
through the whole political process, and if the folks are interested enough in having that,
I would like to see us give that protection in the charter.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Josephson?
Rick, it could be done without violating the charter. I'm asking you a question because I'm assuming that it would be a more stringent requirement in the state law. That you could provide that in the event of any reapportionment or redistricting, that the Assembly would submit at the time of voter approval, the Assembly at least two alternative plans.
I think you could, yes.
That isn't present quite to it. I think that we need to use the very similar sentence to what you have here. In relation to it, if with reapportionment there is a proposed change in the districting philosophy, such as at large, multi-member, or single member, the people shall be given a choice between at least one other, at least given the choice between the type that they have plus whatever proposed
Between the
change.
one they've got
and
the one the Assembly wants to take them to. The ills they have and the ones that they're...
Yes.
but that choice is involved if they turn it down.
If you turn it down, it's
You've got
applied.
what you have now. If you adopt it, you adopt it.
No.
So that's your choice.
No, you misunderstand me. When you go to reapportionment, you have to show a map. All right. If there is a proposal for a change in philosophy, districting, the people should be given a choice between the present one and any proposed change. Do you understand what I'm saying? It goes beyond what you're saying, because whenever you reapportion, you could give two maps, say, of at-large choices. And that's not a choice between two philosophies. But if there is a proposal for a change in philosophy...
No, but I think, as I understand Sherry, what she's saying is that if I am asked to vote on a new apportionment philosophy, and I like the one that I voted for in 1975 and I was in the majority, my remedy is to vote no against the proposed change, because in that way I adhere to the one I've got already.
Mr. Chairman,
What I've got.
I think the problem with that is that if we're sticking with the status quo will not be an acceptable alternative, because by definition you're malapportioned.
So you have to, what you're saying is put two properly constitutional...
properly apportioned maps on.
Yeah.
One would still be the same philosophy, at large or multiple member, whatever the people have chosen in the first go-around. And if they're proposing a different philosophy, they would also give them a properly apportioned one in the new philosophy, and they'd have a choice between the two. But they'd at least have to give them a properly apportioned choice among the one they chose this go-around, plus any properly apportioned choice of the alternative suggested.
Would we then,
Can you do something of that sort?
Well then, Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee be directed to prepare language for next week that would embody Mrs. Froman's...
we have a motion on the floor for adoption.
Yeah, I think we can act on number 6.
And have an amendment come in next.
Because this will be additional language.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Yes.
Those opposed? Change language.
Now, have we then also adopted committee report things by that vote?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we vote.
Now you vote the amendment.
Now we vote for 6.
We voted.
No, we adopted the committee report.
Yeah, but you still have... All right, well...
Did we not?
No, what we
Well,
just did was...
my motion was to direct the production committee come back next week with language on this matter of alternative choices for redistricting.
You want to re-vote? That isn't what you thought you were voting on.
No, but that's all right. It will. All right, let's vote on Joe's motion then. All those in favor?
Yes.
Those opposed? So I don't know how I got the committee report
But we've approved number 6 as far as it goes. haven't we? That
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be back though next
With
week.
additional wording.
Boy, we're getting longer and longer.
Yeah.
I know it.
Well, what's the name of
Right.
it?
Committee report number 7.
Yes. Here, we don't know where we are as far as whether there will be multi-member districts or single-member districts. There's some feeling that if there are single-member districts, the voters' contact with the assembly will be rather remote unless the terms are shortened to 2-year terms. The original charter, of course, called for 3-year terms. Under this language, if there are 11 single-member districts, the assemblymen would serve 2-year terms. However, if some or all assemblymen are elected from multi-member districts, they would serve 3-year terms. If the plan or the districting philosophy is changed, it would not have the effect of converting an elected person's 2-year term into a 3-year term. But that's the reason for the report.
For adoption of the committee report number 7.
A second. Moved by Mrs. Holmes, second by Mr. Sheffield, adoption of committee report number 7. Is there further discussion?
Is the last time it's necessary, is it possible to put that concept in remarks at the end or something like that? Just because it's kind of a long, unwieldy sentence and difficult to read.
Where would you place it? Sherry?
I think we want it locked into the charter that an assembly which is elected from single-member districts may not reapportion and thereby extend their terms.
I understand the concept. All I'm saying is that we put that in the remarks in the end as opposed to...
We want it in the charter so
Wait,
that
when
it
you say
holds.
remarks, do you mean it as something separate from the charter, or do you mean like general provisions?
Comments. The comments. That is
It wouldn't be law then.
Lisa in the charter. Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, since we have no idea what the Assembly's going to put on the ballot, and if they put, some single members and at large, I think that within this we should make reference to at large. And if they have 3-year terms or 2-year terms or what?
At large is more.
At large is a multi-member.
One district with 11 members.
It is?
Question. Question.
Question
That's
been,
terrible.
question been called or further discussion? Not? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
We go to a roll call.
It was just one. It was
I
Lisa.
just said,
Just Lisa. No one else? Just Lisa?
just me.
The committee report number 7 has been adopted with one objection from one no vote cast by Lisa Parker. Committee report number 8.
Okay. Number 8, here our concern was that silently at 3 in the morning and on the eve of an election, the compensation of assemblymen might be increased. And so this just makes it, this means that the increased compensation would not take effect until certification of the results of the next regular election held not less than 60 days after adoption of the ordinance, to kind of give a public reaction a time to be heard. And also, I think that 60-day ties in somewhat with the initiative for the referendum.
And it also ties into one-day filing.
Yeah, it would be known
Yeah.
before filing.
That's right.
I'll move for its adoption.
Second.
It's really quite important because you could wait until after the filing deadline before
Yeah.
you make the move.
Motion by Shy, second by Holmes, for the adoption of the committee report number 8.
I'd like to move, we got one like that for the borough.
If there are no, all those in favor? Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, committee report number 8.
For the salary increases the borough just got, I'd like to get those back to us.
Secretary instructed staff to
Talk about a rip-off.
Who did it first?
The city should be investigated also.
The city did it first, and then the legislature did it, and last was first.
That's great.
Committee report number 9.
Jumped off the high bridge when you jump off right off.
Okay, on number 9, there are a couple of things. In the original first draft charter, Mr. Chairman, vacancies are treated in different articles. There's a vacancy provision under Article 3 for the Assembly. There's a vacancy provision under the mayor, and a vacancy provision under the school board. And they're very broad. They simply say, for example, in terms of the office of the mayor, that the Assembly by ordinance shall adopt standards and procedures for removal of the mayor from office. The philosophy of committee report number 9 is to collect all the vacancy material into one place and to set out some specific criteria, specific causes where the vacancy would exist. The only one which is not clear or not definite is breach of the public trust, cause number 6. Subsection B, however, provides safeguards on that question as to how proceedings to remove an elected official for breach of the public trust would be initiated, and provides for notice, statements of charges, a public hearing with an impartial person, and that the removal would be accomplished only by an extraordinary 2/3 vote. The matter of filling vacancies is changed by making sure, and this was Mayor Sullivan's suggestion, that if a person is appointed to fill a vacancy, that he's qualified, meaning that he has the same charter qualifications as he would have had to have if he had stood for election. I don't know if any member of the committee wants to add something to that, or Mr. Garnett.
I don't have anything to add, Mr. Chairman, except that in terms of length, we save 4 or 5 fairly substantial sections this way, and I think we're net gainers on words so far.
I'll move for its adoption.
Second. Moved by Mr. Shy, second by Mr. Sheffield, adoption of committee report number 9.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Angus?
I'd just like to point out to anybody who wasn't there at that meeting that in Section A, in the filling of vacancies, we talk about if in an extraordinary situation that the number of members on the Assembly should be reduced to less than a quorum, they all killed in a plane accident, that you fill by appointment up to a quorum, and then you, so that you can conduct business. This section. And then the remaining vacancies will be filled by that group. And then that applies to the community. But that you immediately fill enough of that quorum within 7 days.
Any other discussion? Lisa?
Go ahead.
Well, Lisa pointed out quite correctly that we'll have to change the reference to paragraph A of this section. The reason we're vacant on section numbers and so forth is it hasn't really been decided where this thing is going to go. It's a general vacancy provision to apply to school board, assembly, and mayor. Not finally decided whether it would be. So, the reference would have to be changed.
Oh, boy. I was reading these minutes, Mr. Chairman. I wish I had read them before they were approved. Huh?
What did you say that you didn't say?
Well, I didn't, may I digress for a moment? This is a levity. Speaking of the strong mayor argument on page 3, reference to me, it says, Josephson said he agreed with a friend who said that the criteria is people. The best constitutions in the world are found in the Soviet Union. I respectfully submit, Mr. Chairman, I never said that I agreed with that.
I heard him say it.
I cited that as
But we
indicating
haven't
that
approved.
just a different view.
We haven't approved.
Okay.
Then the reference should have to be changed, but that,
I gotta get that to the paper. Where'd you find that? Used, will you pick that up?
Okay.
Where are we right now?
well, we have a motion to adopt committee report number 9, moved by Mr. Dye.
Can we have a second to go through it?
And just assemblymen, and be included in the general provisions after qualifications for elective office, rather than here. And I think that, we changed for these determination of vacancies in elective office, and I felt these terms, membership, and qualifications that we spoke to in report number 7 should not have been just for assemblymen, but should have spoken for all elected officers.
Mary, doesn't this come under a separate report?
Yeah, but it wasn't given along with this. It was supposed to have had a minority report.
Yeah,
with
no, Mary, that comes under a different one. That comes under the one where it is now, I think. I mean, that comes under the one where we consider the...
Well, it should have been considered with number 7 because that's where the wording would have been changed and moved. It should have been there. And
Not in 7.
no, report 7, committee report 7, section 302.
Yeah, but...
And where this is speaking to terms, membership, and qualification just of assemblymen, I think it should have spoken to terms, membership, and qualification of all elected officers.
Mary,
And
all
put
it
in
talks
general.
about is the apportionment of the assembly.
That's what I'm speaking to. I say the wording should have been changed.
Oh.
I had a minority report that should have shown the wording being changed.
When we considered this one, this did not come up. Mary's point came up when we considered the school section. We were considering the qualifications for office and terms and so forth of school board members. And she requested a minority report to be placed before you, which would lump all of those things, the assembly, the mayor, and the school board, into the section with determining vacancies in offices. And I don't know if we had that minority report. I thought it was to be considered when we considered the school section rather than at this time, but if you wish to...
I wanted it
Number
considered with school.
22 is where you had wanted it considered, Mary.
No, I wanted it under both. I said I wanted all those together under that, and that was where I wanted it brought in. And we considered the first part of it without bringing it in.
Lisa,
Are we still on committee report number 9?
we're still on committee report number 9.
I have a question that Mr. Josephson on subsection B in determining vacancies. A public hearing conducted by an impartial hearing officer. What's that? Who's the impartial hearing officer?
I did want to decide how you would decide who the impartial hearing officer would be.
I don't know who he is. The ordinance would provide for a method of selection. There are hearing officers. Mr. Rose has done a lot of that work, incidentally. But there are
panels of hearing officers that are available, or there are some situations where judges appoint the impartial hearing officer. I can't identify them there.
Okay, thank you.
Now, where are we? Are we able to find that reference of Mary's that was, you said on 22? I don't see
It's in the last.
Can we go through this
Section
first?
22 on qualification and terms, in the sheet that you have that has all of the committee reports following committee report number 9. It would be committee report number 22, and the minority report is not contained here.
I don't have that. I don't have anything after 9.
You have this, it has numbers on it.
That one. That's just the union of the-
I'm old enough to do that.
I don't see the minority report either, Pat.
Minority
I thought you said you typed it.
No, I was going to have to sit down there. I hadn't time to have it.
Okay.
So Mary, why don't
Why don't you give your committee
do it now?
report?
All right. It would shorten the charter if we spoke to the terms, membership, and qualifications. Look at number 7. It would shorten the charter if we spoke to the terms, the membership, and the qualification of the school board, the assembly, and the mayor all at once. And if we made it very similar to what 302 is, but if we said all elected officers that are elected from single-member districts, the term of that officer is 2 years. If some or all elected officers are elected from multiple member districts, the term of that officer is 3 years. And that could be, you see, all three. Well, it could be mayor, or school board, or assembly. In the event of a change from a plan containing all single-member districts to a plan containing some or all multiple-member districts, the term of the incumbent elected from single-member district is not extended. All you would be doing would be not repeating a sentence for each one of them, or a number of sentences for each one of them. You'd have this one section following the general provisions in relation to elections and qualifications and vacancies.
This grew out of a discussion that we had about what you do if you move the school board from an at-large election to single-member districts. Do you wish to change the term of school board members from 3 years to 2 years? If in the future the school board were elected from single-member districts.
Mr. Chairman,
You do that.
so far we've been proceeding on the assumption, and I think it's a good assumption, that the state law provision requiring that school boards be elected at large would govern, by analogy to this Supreme Court decision we're familiar with. Assuming that's true, districting as a concept would only have relevance with respect to assemblymen. I do agree, I think, that subsections B, C, and D under 302 might well be generalized, because they talk about the basic qualifications for the candidate and this sort of thing, some language. But
Well,
it's particularly when dealing with reapportionment.
I don't think it hurts. I don't think it hurts to have all of them deal with general, because there may, at some date in the future, that Constitution may change. The state Constitution may change the next time they have a constitutional thing, or there may come up a statewide amendment to the Constitution, and it would be allowed by this either way, and it would be spoken to whether or not it is ever changed.
Certainly no legal objection to it as far as I can tell.
Is there any? Lisa?
I know there is some wishes that I have been hearing the last year to have more local control of the school district in areas than the as largest one we have. And it wouldn't surprise me in the next few years to see some move to
Do we have a motion on the floor? Except for you.
Yes, there is a motion. Yeah, there is a motion to adopt committee report number 9.
Can we go to that and then go back?
Can we finish with that?
Yeah, we can finish number 9.
Call for the question on acceptance of report number 9.
Second.
Question has been called for on acceptance of committee report number 9. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Lisa, you had a question, I'm sorry.
Proceedings for removal of an elected official for breach of public trust is be initiated by a majority of all members of the assembly or school board or whatever. How about by a people?
Where are you at?
That's a recall.
Yeah. Could it still put it in there? Still, I
Well,
know
the
it's
people
recall.
recall can occur for any reason. I mean,
You don't even have to have a
you don't
good reason.
have a good reason. In fact, there's a recall Tuesday in Seattle.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Are we all gonna go down to 10?
Yeah.
See how they do
Pretty
it.
interesting.
Yeah, recall there.
Yeah. Fire department's mad at it. Or
You have a ballot lined up at the same time?
no, it's a special. Okay, let's get on. What do we know?
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
I would like to move that we go back to report number 7. And I would like to move that we,
Motion at 9.
I thought we'd taken care of that. I thought we took care of 9.
You said you wanted to move to go back on the
Oh,
committee report number.
I don't think we have to go back to the
Request.
committee report. I think we can just go back to the section
Yeah.
of the charter.
all right.
It's not the intent of the committee to preempt. Anyway.
Right, let's go on.
Well, is my motion in order?
Your motion is in order.
However I word it.
However you word it. You would like to return to
Committee report 7.
committee report 7 covering Article 3, 302.
To what?
Review.
I would like to
Is
move.
there a second? Is there a second to that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Now, what?
I would like to move that we make this section applicable to all elected officers, as well as the other ones under 302, rather than it's, and be put under general provisions in a applicable place.
Are you speaking of the mayor too?
Yes.
The mayor would serve 2 years?
Well,
He would never be elected from a single-man district, so he would always serve for 3 years.
well,
No, he is elected from a single member district.
He's elected from a multi-member district, which is at large.
he's elected at
There's
large.
one mayor, and his district is the mayor's district at large.
But I thought a multi-member district was an at-large district.
We had said that before, Joe.
That's true for the assembly because you have 11 people elected
All right.
in one
Then
ballot.
I don't
but-
wish to include the mayor. I wish to include both school board and the other.
Hard to say all elected office.
Well, we can say all elected officers other than the mayor.
Mrs. Hall?
I think that we kind of lose the benefit that Mary wants to gain at this point because we can't have the mayor and because of state law at this point we can't have the school board because the school board has to be elected at large. And
The
so-
charter also provides at this point that the school board will be elected at large. We should, of course, change that. But
Mary, if you, assuming that we retain the at-large feature for the school board, and assuming that later on that becomes changed by amendment, wouldn't the way to handle that be to pick up the term of office at the same time you change?
One can. One can.
Lisa?
I'm confused. You said that multi-member districts are at large, but that the mayor could be from a single-man district.
Because there's only
Only one
one.
But he's elected at large.
There's only one mayor.
There's only one mayor.
At large just refers to the fact that everyone votes. Multi-member districts for the assembly happen to also be at large.
Within the district.
multi-member districtness is not a feature of geography, but of the number of people coming from the area in question.
But if there were at-large people elected, and well, if there was an apportionment that had multi-member districts and at-large and single-member districts, how long would the at-large people serve for?
It says
It doesn't say.
Well, it says
the last sentence in there does.
No, I see it. Well, it
All
says
of the
some or
dresses.
all.
Plans.
If you have any multi-member districts, everybody has a 3-year term.
This,
I'd like to explain that too, that there was some discussion, Lisa, of saying that if you have that kind of an apportionment, that maybe the single-member people ought to serve 2-year terms and the multi-member people ought to serve 3-year terms.
And at large 4.
Well, the problem, no, we didn't discuss that. The problem with that was that I think the committee thought that it's better that everyone be equal in terms of the length of the term he serves when he's serving in a body like that. That there's some discrepancies that come in if some people are elected for 2 years because they represent a single member district and others are elected for 3 years because they represent a multi-member district. I could go into that.
Chairman, I would call for the question. Call for the question.
question been called.
Yeah, may I?
What is the
may I get
motion?
the motion direct from you appropriately?
What? All right. The motion, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, all right, is to change section 302 to include if all elected officials are elected from single-member districts, the term would be two years. If some or all of elected officials are elected from multi-member districts, the term will be 3 years, dropping the word assembly. In the event of a change from a plan containing all single-member districts to a plan containing some or all multi-member districts, the terms of incumbents elected from single-member districts are not extended. Is that correct?
That's the idea.
So,
Rick?
I have one comment. This is gremlins in these things always pop up. I think if you have that literal language, for instance, if you have any multi-member districts in your assembly, you will have to have 3-year terms for your school board, regardless of what sort of apportionment you have for your school board, because you're lumping all elected officials into one kitty, I think, and you're making
it did sound that way from the way you read it that time, and that wasn't the intent.
Okay.
You're right.
Sorry, I was
You're
only
right.
speaking to the language.
Well, you're
Yeah.
speaking to the language as I read it.
Yes.
Right? And you don't think that would be...
I don't think that language
Would
would
serve.
sufficiently distinguish between the school board and the assembly. You know, it would make...
I retract my suggestion, if I may, and get us out of this difficulty.
All right. We have a motion to adopt Mary's suggestion.
And she's withdrawn.
I've withdrawn it,
She has
if I may.
withdrawn the motion. As her second agreed.
Unanimous consent. I ask for unanimous consent.
Mr. Chairman, could I comment briefly on this whole subject? I think we've done enough with respect to vacancy. What I mean is we have done so many things with respect to vacancies and qualifications and terms that it's probably going to be worthwhile as a matter of style in this thing to have an article called public officers or something of that sort, rather than dumping all these things into the general provisions. Those things that are unique to assembly will be under assembly, likewise school board, general things under public officers. And I think we can generalize the concepts in 302 to a large extent, as you suggest.
Well, my thought was that if we generalized it in that general manner, though the wording that I gave was wrong, that it would allow for changes in ordinance and changes in the school board if the state charter changed with the least difficulty. And I don't guess it is terribly important because we would have to have some sort of
I think an approach to what you're saying would just be in the article on school board to say that the term of school board members shall be as provided by law or something of that sort. We've used that before.
that would be all right. That would be all right, rather than saying 3 years and that.
Mr. Josephson, what's next? Committee report 10.
I yield to Sherry Holmes for this set because this comes up
In the meetings that you were unable to attend. Barry?
Mr. Chairman, the proposed for 309
and seconded, adoption of committee report, section 309, ombudsman. Committee report 10 on section 309.
Does this still allow him to make maps?
This is allowed to make maps.
Right.
Oh, he can do anything.
Oh, good, okay, I'm a little worried.
He can make whoopee if he wants.
Yeah, I don't want him forgetting this.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Make more maps.
All those in favor?
Great that you can crack
Aye.
one.
Those opposed?
Opposed. Just on the basis of ombudsman.
One opposition vote. Secretary, please record the vote. Mr. Shy. Opposed to section 309, committee report 10. Committee report 10 has been adopted. Committee report 11, Mrs. Holmes.
Mr. Chairman, the bracketed material is proposed for deletion, and I believe that was because we have prohibitions already in section 1404 against holding other elected public office, and it was felt that this was going to be duplication. I will move for that.
Moved by Ms. Holmes, second by Ms. Hague. Adoption of committee report number 11 on section 401. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Committee report 11 has been adopted in unanimous vote.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, that we really need to act on committee report 10. Since we have established a comprehensive vacancies section committee report 12. We've established a comprehensive vacancies section, and
It's no longer needed here.
it's no longer needed in section 403. So that, I
Don't
guess,
need a
Move for
vote.
deletion.
okay, I will move for the adoption of committee report 12.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Adoption of committee report 12. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Committee report 12 has been adopted. Committee report 13.
Committee report 13 is a policy issue on the name for what we have called the manager in this draft of the charter. We had some testimony at public hearings that we should call the man or woman the chief administrative officer.
That's strictly a policy issue as to change of that one
Yes.
term.
Mr. Chairman,
Jane?
I think the term manager evokes exactly the duties that we want the chief administrative officer to perform, and that he should in fact retain the title manager. Even if they get confused with another form of government, the functions that he performs are exactly the same as the city manager.
Mr. Chairman, I move to answer the policy question, no.
Not
No.
change it. Move it, not change it.
You moved to answer the policy question.
The no flow reflect.
Well, the question is whether the term manager is misleading and should be dropped in favor of chief administrative officer or something.
No, the term
I move to
manager.
answer the question, no.
Moved and seconded, and the question, the policy issue raised in committee report 13 be no. All those in favor?
Wait a minute, what are we voting on here? Wait a
We're
minute.
going to retain the word manager.
I'm opposed. I'm opposed.
There's two opposed, Mr. Chai and Ms. Parker.
Then no doesn't carry then.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Six to two.
1, 2,
No, there aren't.
4, 5.
Then there aren't 6 left. She's right. We've got too many gone.
Six,
No,
no, there's
there's
six.
six.
Okay, okay.
6-2.
You didn't count the other side of the table.
That's right.
There's 7 of us.
No.
There
Oh,
are
you
still
count.
Yeah, that's right. Committee report. Okay. 13 has been answered with the negative. Statement no.
Retain it if we have it.
Section committee report 14.
Mr. Chairman, the change represented here is a proposal to delete the words, shall prescribe the purpose, function, rules of wording purpose, function, rules of procedure, and has been replaced by prescribe the duties.
Terms and qualifications.
No, terms and qualifications are already there. The word duties is new, and it replaces the language purpose, function, rules of procedure, and.
Eliminating purpose, function, rules of procedure, and substituting therefore the word duties.
We felt that that was.
Is there a motion?
I move for adoption.
Moved by Mrs. Holmes, second by Mr. Sheffield, to adopt committee report 14.
Now, this does allow that, that each board and commission then adopts its own rules of procedure, which is, I think, the way it currently is done in the borough.
Yes.
Rick, feel free to check on that.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the committee report number 14?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Committee report number 14 has been adopted. On a unanimous vote. Committee report number 15, section 501, community councils.
Mr. Chairman, actually reports 15 and 16 go together, and there has been extensive revision of the community council section. It's been considerably shortened. I'm looking for
Is that other part in
that
there?
other sentence. We're missing a sentence.
Have we missed something?
Recognition?
Following the word councils at the end of report 15, we recommend the sentence, the assembly by ordinance may establish criteria for the recognition of community councils. The assembly by ordinance may establish criteria for the recognition of community councils. Period. Now, presently, what happens is that community councils are submitted to the assembly for recognition by them as a duly constituted community council. And what we felt was that the assembly should have an ordinance which sets out the criteria which a community council must meet before being able to be recognized by the assembly. We felt that anyone in the community would be free to establish a community council that was not a recognized community council on their own volition, that would not fall under the charter. But so long as a community council wished to be recognized by the assembly, that it ought to follow the criteria that they established.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm very concerned about this proposed change in 15 and 16. And so I'll just ask this by way of a question as to whether this stems from extensive public testimony against Article 5 as we drafted it. Because I thought that some of the testimony that we had was that people were reading 501 to infer that the establishment of community councils was discretionary with the legislative body when 501 was intended to let the genesis of the community council be out in the public. But and our stock answer to that was that under 502 the legislative body had to provide for procedures to allow for the sharing of powers. Now we're giving a lot of credibility to that kind of criticism, because not only do we keep the first sentence of 501, but we say that we would say that the Assembly by ordinance may establish criteria for the recognition of community councils, which means that they wouldn't have to do anything.
Mr. Chairman, if you read on the next page, we had quite a bit of testimony, and I can't recall from whom, but from various people, that there is a board of supervisors which can be established to supervise services and actual sharing of powers, and that function belongs more appropriately under an elected board of supervisors, which happens to represent the exact area of the service that they're supervising, as opposed to a community council, which we wish to remain somewhat loosely formed and with the flexibility of each community council to form as it sees fit. And that does not necessarily coincide with supervising a service or sharing of power.
Saying that
Yeah. My feeling about the section the way it's written now is that community councils have lost power. And I understand there was a lot of testimony saying that we don't want to do services because that makes it's very difficult for a community to perceive how they would do that. But I don't have any suggestions right now for changing it other than what we've done is just create the thing where you can go out and form a community council. You have to follow the criteria established by the Assembly. You have to come before the Assembly to be recognized as a community council before we'll do business with you. But if you other people out there want to form a community council of your own that we choose not to recognize, then you can go ahead and do that.
We don't say that. That was my own wording.
Okay, is that the effect?
The effect. That's the effect.
Okay, well, I don't like it.
You're going to get a bunch of rabble rousers otherwise.
Mr. Parker?
Franchise.
Everybody says a poker is going to form a community council under this thing.
Lisa?
We had
You don't control it.
the problem at the public hearings where people felt that the community councils were going to be another level of government. And I'm not sure how the people saw them as another level of government, where maybe, if they wanted to do something within their area, first they would have to go to the community council, and then after that, follow the procedures on up the line as you have to do now.
Mr. Chairman,
There was a misinterpretation of respect to the sharing of rights and powers. And we either clarify that or we kind of just believe it maybe.
Mr. Sheffield?
I don't have my notes with me, but I can recall on my notes from listening to the public hearings. It seemed like the majority of the people that I talked to admitted that the community council was a good idea, was a coming thing, but that the procedures and so on and so forth should be left up to ordinance by the new assembly or what they're going to be.
Well, there was great apprehension about community councils for this very reason, that there's going to be another layer of government.
So we should maybe wipe out the whole section.
Well, I think they should be advisory, really.
But Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Joseph?
I understand that, but I really don't see the problem in Article 5 as it was written. It said that the legislative body, by ordinance, shall provide for procedures to allow for negotiation between the local government and each community council with respect to sharing of rights and powers, and may provide for each community council to supervise the furnishing of services in an area. That meant that we were really encouraging a negotiation process, but it left to the Assembly the option of saying things like, it seemed to me that, your area of your community council doesn't comport geographically with the service being rendered, and therefore you don't meet our criteria. I don't see that the Assembly would have any problem with Article 5 as it exists.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Froney?
the last sentence in Article 503 says the ordinance shall provide that if a community council wishes to share rights and powers or supervise a service. A representative governing body shall be elected by the community council. And I think that this wording maybe needs some slight changing by Rick to show that it would be a election by all qualified voters and not just election within the community council, because that was the intent in the area, by all qualified voters in the area covered by the community council.
Mrs. Holmes?
Mr. Chairman, Joe, if we provide in the service area section for an elected board of supervisors to supervise the furnishing of services in an area, do you see any reason for having a community council do it?
Does that then mean that the community council has to go and fight with their own board of supervisors as opposed to the assembly? That board of supervisors is elected by the community? Right. Now, as I understand it, all you've done is change the name of that board from a community council to a board of
But
supervisors.
the boundaries
The service
of the
areas
board
are
of-
weird.
Of the service area boundaries then determine the boundaries from which the people are elected to supervise the service. And that's the big difference, because the community councils are not necessarily contiguous with the
Service
boundaries
areas.
of the service areas. And I would feel quite upset if I had a community council supervising the services in my area, but I was not in the area allowed to belong to the community council.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you a question? Well, see, I haven't read all of this thing, but at the same time, because we haven't formed one as yet, as you heard, but we do intend to form a community councils. And to me, I think it's very feasible. And on top of that, it's the way you word this thing now. If you got a community council, then whoever is the chairman of the council comes to this board and kind of more or less negotiate with things, and I think it'll save an awful lot of time and trouble. One man come in and bring in the beef of the whole community.
We appreciate your comment, Tom.
Mr. Rowan, the Phantom came in and went out somewhere.
Make a survey.
But
Maybe he's not in the chair.
I noticed that in his report, page 4, he says that the two basic concepts of the charter, centralization of power, strong mayor, strong assembly, and decentralization of power, community councils, need for referenda on taxes, the ombudsman, are not contradictory in the public mind. He says there's nothing contradictory about these dual concepts. They appear to be strongly supported by the public, especially in the decentralization aspect. I really am concerned about in that light too of making much change here, because I just don't see the practical problem in the community council. It's true we're not answering a lot of questions, but that's because they can better be answered in practice, case by case.
If my memory serves me correctly, we've had a tremendous amount of testimony, though, from people who were concerned about the sharing of rights and powers being given to the community councils.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
You have to remember that you're not supposed to infringe upon the rights of the people that aren't belonging to that community council. And how far can a community council go without getting completely wrapped up in the whole governmental system? How many rights and powers can they take on?
And still remain.
I see no reason why it can't be left almost as it is. Where I was speaking to was that if it is to supervise some service or take on some power, that our intent was not that the governing body of that community council would be an informally elected body, but that it would have to be formally elected. Now, we can have two kinds of community councils, the way we have worded this. We can have one that is just advisory and does not supervise a single service, in which case they could have an informally elected governing body. But if they are out in Girdwood and they want to supervise a number of services, or if they were out in Eagle River and they do want to supervise a number of services for their entire area, that also would be allowed under the wording as we have it here, with the change that it shall be, that the governing officers shall be elected properly according to, so that it would be. Now, if we did, it would in fact be a under level of government. But there is not any power that is being granted them by the new governing body that could not be taken away if at any time it began to impose upon those who were not within that community council.
If the committee report of which I am chairman is rejected, as I hope it will be, Ms. Angvik has an amendment to 503 going to the point that Mrs. Froney just raised, which would, where there's reference to, which would change the last sentence, where there is reference to the shall be elected by the community council, would insert shall be elected by the residents residing in the service area. And that, I think, meets a lot of the complaint that may have been voiced.
Service area?
Supervisory service.
There's been no motion on 15 and 16 as far as I know. Sherry Holmes?
Mr. Chairman, that really gets kind of confusing, though, because if you have a community council that's not contiguous with the boundaries of a service area, then
But the legislature, the assembly can require them to do that.
well, but I don't think that that's a good idea. I think by that action, we are actually undercutting the autonomy of community councils and locking them into a governmental unit, which is the service area, where we really could effectively use a service area board of supervisors to supervise the service in the area, and have the community councils be what they can be most effectively, which is a voice and a communication tool for the people in the neighborhood.
But the option is with them.
But they can do it either way.
But
This
the
way.
option
It says that the ordinance shall provide that if a community council wishes to share rights.
But you see, we haven't prohibited that in the suggested language either. We haven't prohibited the ordinance from doing all sorts of things. It's consistent with the philosophy that we've adopted in the charter, that we leave the local government with a lot of latitude in how they wish to set these things up, and it can be flexible from time to time.
Parker?
Maximum involvement in what?
Ms. Parker?
I feel that we should allow, that we should move the supervising of the service over to the service area section because of the way the service areas are set up. But
Yeah, that's what it should. Ms. Angry?
okay.
Chairman.
My concern with the way it's written right now is that it appears to me to be very, very, very much watered down. And that may allow for broad interpretation, Sherry, as you suggest. But the wording that residents, the opportunity for maximum community involvement in what, for what, how could people getting together be an infringement on my right? See,
Chairman, Sherry seems to think that if we leave this here, we will not also include it under service areas. And my intent is that we allow service areas to have commissioners the same as Chugach Fire District does presently, as well as having it here. Now, this does allow the non-contiguous parts of the borough to have something that would be a little bit more powerful than a community council in the central city. Now, in the central city, we no doubt would not do this. But it does allow some sub-government for Girdwood and Bird Creek and Eagle River if they wish it.
Mr. Chai? I was going to comment on her comment. That is, community councils are a brand new thing. There's been no experience with them. We don't know anything about them. They're relatively new. They're being tried down below. I agree with Sherry. We ought not tied down with all these powers. We don't know what we're getting into. Some of us are being very politically naive the way we're arguing this thing, because a couple of smart politicians can grab a community council and raise havoc with it. They know how to manipulate it.
Ms. Parker?
If we allow for community councils to supervise services, then either they're going to have appointed or elected people to supervise the service, and we're getting away from the whole concept of a community council.
It's not too bad.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know how we're going to handle this. I certainly have the political judgment that if you make this change, it's going to be perceived as a much more substantial watering down than it may have been intended to be. And I think that is a very risky thing to do, because as we all know, the testimony that you get after the first draft is in response to people who are troubled by the draft. Now, unfortunately, we don't plan a second round of hearings to make a revision in the second draft, but I just sense that, and if I'm reading Mike's report properly, that's what's going to happen. I think it'd be a very serious mistake. I don't know that there's really substantively all that much difference, except to the degree that the Assembly could delegate certain supervisory roles under the original draft. A lot of the other material in the original isn't changed substantively, but by tinkering with it, I think you're going to impress people that you're watering it down more than you intended. Ms. Holmes?
I would move that we refer the community council section back to the committee to draft up a different wording. And it's obvious to me that this wording is not acceptable, and that the regular wording is not acceptable, and rather than take the time of the whole body now to draft it.
I don't.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Now, is there discussion on the motion?
I want to go for a substitute motion, but I don't think I better because it'll receive a lot of flack.
I did.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, that we leave 501, that 502 we change in the first draft that was published, that we change the section 502 to the Assembly by ordinance may provide for procedures, ending with powers, and that section 502 and 503 be combined, and 503 reading the Assembly by ordinance may provide for the further establishment of community councils.
I don't get your move, Lisa.
501 stays the same
As what, Lisa?
as in the first draft.
As it is in the...
Yeah. That 502 we changed to after by ordinance in the first line, shall to may, ending with rights and powers and scratching out the rest. And 503, the Assembly by ordinance may provide for the further establishment of community councils.
Mr. Chairman,
Should I speak on that motion?
Well,
Say something?
no.
I mean, just merely a suggestion. The way I see this, the community council is just a spokesman for his community. I don't see why he should even be involved as far as that concerned. He's talking about powers. I don't think the community council should have no power. That he's just merely a spokesman for his community instead of dealing with the whole community. We got there's one man up there, just like we got a U.S. Senator in Washington. He speaks for two senators that speak for the whole state. And it's not merely being power. That's the way I look at it.
Thanks for your comment.
Mr. Chairman, could we have,
I'm sorry, the substitute, there's no motion.
Second.
Been seconded. Is there a discussion regarding the substitute motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, can I ask if I have a change? Can I amend my substitute motion?
You have clarifications, Lisa.
That in 501, community councils are established to provide residents.
All right. The motion then, the substitute motion then would read, the community councils are established to provide residents the opportunity for maximum community self-determination without infringing upon the rights of persons not represented by community councils. Is that correct, Lisa?
Not represented by the community council.
By the community council. And your next section 502 would be the legislative body by ordinance may provide for procedures to allow for negotiation between the local government and each community council with respect to sharing of rights and powers. Period. And, you're going to add that
Yeah,
too?
the assembly.
And that assembly by ordinance may provide for the establishment,
Further,
provide for what?
the further establishment.
Further establishment. Further establishment of community councils.
What does that mean?
I don't quite get there.
What is that last sentence? That anything else that the assembly would feel that they should do to enact this section of this article, they could do.
Is there any further discussion on the
Question.
substitute? Jane?
Lisa, is the effect of the amendment that the role of the assembly is that they may or may not be involved in the recognition of community councils? If they wanted to recognize community councils, then when they further establish, the thing, they could. But the effect is the community councils can just exist and be, and they don't have to go through any formal hearing or anything like that before the assembly. Just like a homeowners association kind of. Any group of people can get together and they don't have to be recognized by anybody.
Okay, now I have
a question.
I was going to ask, what is the rationale in changing the word may to are? What's the point in doing that?
Well, if
You're not making it permissive anymore, you're making it mandatory?
we're not making it mandatory.
Well, why do you change a word may to are?
I have questions.
Sounds better.
Descriptive.
They do exist.
Descriptive
In reality,
of a
right now.
reason. It's a descriptive of a reason rather than a statement of
Well,
information.
Mr. Chairman, I have a problem with this. I would rather stick with Joe's amendment, or Sherry's amendment that Joe seconded to refer it back to committee, because if we are intending to have the community councils to provide the opportunity for maximum community self-determination, then we must not take the possibility for the negotiation of powers to that community council away. If we are no longer wishing the community council to have any community self-determination, then we take the powers away. Now, I go along with Joe. The other day I didn't object to it, thinking that the service areas would do it, but the service areas will not do it in the sense that both Eagle River and Girdwood and Indian and some of the other outlying areas really think that they should do. So I do want to leave the possibility for negotiating powers so long as it does not infringe upon the rights of persons that aren't represented.
That possibility is there.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's not guaranteed to be there.
It's like putting pressure on a politician there.
Mr. Chairman, I do think it should go back to committee for discussion. First of all, I'm concerned that when we talk about powers and services, we may be thinking too conventionally here. I think there is merit in Mrs. Holmes' point that if the result were to straitjacket a community council in some way as to the area, have the assembly leverage the council to change its boundaries in order to administer a service, that might be undesirable. But there may be certain kinds of local services in a neighborhood that should be and could be operated perhaps better by the community council than by anybody else. And I really object to adopting now language that just makes all of this permissive, because in the first draft we were clear that the Charter Commission was mandating that there would be councils, that there was going to be that the Assembly was going to have to provide for procedures and would be expected to negotiate with community councils. Now we're just saying it's a completely different spirit to the thing. Now we're just saying if we adopt the amendment that it's a sop. You might get it, you might not, and I think the reaction will be very negative.
Mr. Chai?
This is fine, but we had all these public hearings for a purpose, and a lot of testimony came out that negated a lot of these things that we originally put in the first draft. Do we or don't we take any heed of what the hell the public is saying to us?
I think we take heed to it.
Well, let's look at it.
Well, we
sensibly.
do. May I answer that, Mr. Chairman, through the chair? I don't only through the chair. I think that you give heed to it, but you also have to give heed to the surveys we've conducted and to our own judgment in the matter and to the knowledge, Fred, that if we had done it this way, I can't say it's knowledge, it's an opinion, that if we had done it this way, we would have had a lot of testimony saying you haven't done it.
Mr. Chai?
Concluding remark to that is we're getting into a bag of worms if we don't handle this community council properly.
I agree.
A real bag of worms.
Mr. Chairman, I intend to vote against the substitute motion and for the main motion, and I would call for the question on the substitute motion.
The question has been called on the substitute motion.
What is this, substitute motion?
We had it back to committee for some more work.
No, substitute motion was Lisa's motion. And
Okay.
do you wish a roll call vote on it, or
All right.
roll call vote on
Lisa's motion.
Lisa's motion, substitute motion? Start with...
Engbeck?
No.
Chai?
No.
Roney?
No.
Holmes?
No.
Josephson? No. Parker?
Yes.
Reed?
No.
Sheffield?
No. Substitute motion failed for lack of a majority. Main motion now is to refer to Article 5 back to the committee for mushy wording. Question has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
Mr. Chairman, on committee report number 17, which refers to section 601. The proposal is to delete the words "for inspection." We
had testimony at public hearings that they ought to be available for more than just inspection. You ought to be able to obtain copies of them. I would move for adoption.
Second.
Second. Move for adoption of, second for adoption of Committee Report 17, eliminating the words "for inspection" in subsection 5 of 601. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Mr. Chairman?
Lisa? I guess I didn't give an opportunity for discussion on the motion at all.
No, it's just, there's no number 5.
It's not
It's
five.
in B,
B.
601B.
Yeah.
I just,
B.
B. Where did the 5 come from?
That's what we want to know.
Reading off
Well,
of the
that's not in
report. Okay, it's in subsection B.
Chair. under,
Lisa?
under section 601, I think that it's important that we mention that ordinances are subject to referendum.
Well, don't we have an area that
We
says
have,
that?
we have an area that says, that talks about initiative and referendum, but, you know, we should make mention, you know, just like one sentence that says, like after A, that says, all ordinances are subject to referendum.
Madam, Mr. Chairman, all ordinances are not subject to referendum because budgets are adopted by ordinance, bonds are adopted by ordinance, and we cannot make that statement truthfully.
In accordance with section
You'd have to say
whatever,
it.
whatever.
You'd have to. You'd have to.
Complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a motion on that? Is there a motion on it?
There's no.
Lisa, do you wish to
Yeah.
make a motion on that?
No, forget it.
I'll move for the adoption.
We already.
We already did.
Well, that's what I asked. We had a motion.
Well, we already adopted it.
We
We already
adopted it.
voted on it.
At least it was brought it back.
Okay.
I just mentioned it.
I didn't allow discussion on it.
Mr.
Applied
Chairman?
too fast.
Committee
Sure.
report number 18, actions requiring an ordinance. Originally, that section was taken from the 1971 charter. And the 1971 charter contained in the planning section a very specific section saying that that zoning will be adopted by ordinance. And so therefore, it was not included in the list of those things which additionally would require an ordinance, because it was specifically referred to in the other charter. And so the proposal here is to add a section between the present 6 and 7, which would become the new section 7, 602,
Right.
requiring that zoning or similar land use control measures be done by ordinance.
Look,
I move for adoption.
Second.
been moved and seconded for adoption. May I interpose here that, Sherry, does this encompass the idea of 802? Now, yeah, I understand it goes in 601, 602, item 7, but under section 802, planning commission, there shall be a planning commission as constituted as provided by ordinance. Is that changed already?
No, that's as is, but in addition, in that section of the
All right,
71
I
charter,
see. You had this
said that
zoning,
zoning would be
yeah.
adopted by ordinance.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt committee report number 18 on section 602, adding zoning or similar land use control measures as item 7 under
And
602
renumbering.
and renumbering 7, 8 to 8 and 9.
Except that it's short, we'll just put it after the very long one. If you want to move that amendment.
Is there any discussion regarding it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Adoption of committee report number 18. Committee report number 19.
refers to section 603 on emergency ordinances. The present wording says that the mayor may veto an emergency ordinance only during the meeting at which the ordinance is adopted. The proposal you have before you is to allow him to veto an emergency ordinance within 36 hours after the adoption of the ordinance. The reason for this is that should the mayor not attend all assembly meetings, he might miss the opportunity to veto an emergency ordinance, and that might not be fair.
Mr. Chairman, it was understood that it took the same number of voters to override a veto, but in this case, the mayor's veto would just cause them to have to reaffirm their first vote. It would not make them have to have extra votes, because it did take the same majority to pass an emergency ordinance that it did the other. But it would cause them to take a second look at it. That's all it would accomplish.
Mr. Chairman, that's not necessarily true, Mary, because an emergency ordinance may be enacted by all of those present.
That's right. You're
which
right.
can be less than two-thirds.
Less than 3/4.
It
That's
can
right.
be
It could be. I mean, you're right.
What is an emergency?
Emergency is not described except in the
Definition?
definition somewhere, I think.
It's effective only for 60 days, and you have to state what the emergency is.
Is there further discussion regarding Committee Report 19?
Have we moved for adoption?
Move for adoption.
Second.
A motion by Josephson, second by Sheffield for adoption of Committee Report number 19. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Committee Report number 20.
This proposes, Mr. Chairman, a deletion of the words by ordinance under codification. Now, we considered both section 604 and section 605 together, and we had before us the question of shall the by ordinances be deleted from both 604 and 605. It was the suggestion of the committee that only in 605 should the by ordinance be removed. The reasoning behind this is that in 605 you're merely providing for the indexing and codification of things that have already been done with the proper notice and so forth. Whereas in 604, you are adopting by reference a standard code of regulations, and before that standard code of regulations is adopted, it was felt there should be a public hearing in case someone knew of some subtle reference within that code that would not be applicable to Alaska. So I would move for adoption of Committee Report 20.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Holmes, second by Ms. Froney, adoption of Committee Report 20, removing the word by ordinance from 605 codification. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Committee Report number 21.
This refers, Mr. Chairman, to section 703. And I believe that the committee recommendation is for no change from section 703 as it's presently worded. The policy issue is whether 30 days residence should be required in the election district as well as in the municipality. And the committee this afternoon felt that the wording as it presently stands is better.
Anchorage, not
You have to be a resident as it presently is now. You have to be a resident of Anchorage for 30 days, and you just have to be a resident of the district you seek to vote in. But you could move from one district to another the day before the election and still vote in your new district, so long as you have been a resident of Anchorage for 30 days prior to the election.
I have one question here that I didn't think of this afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I think that one should be allowed to vote a question ballot somewhere else that might be referred to that district where he lives. You know, at times it is well nigh impossible for a voter to get to his own voting thing, and he is allowed to vote a question ballot that is referred back to his district if the ballot that he is voting in another district has the same candidates that his district would have had.
Is that a matter to be addressed in the charter? No.
No, that's a procedural
Question
matter.
ballots aren't, those are
We have the choice under report number 21 of keeping the present language or adopting the suggested language.
Right. It's a committee report to keep the present language or not adopt.
I like the present language, but I'm wondering whether we have foreclosed ourselves on the question I was asking.
No, we haven't, because that comes under election procedures.
Procedures have that in
All right.
election law.
Okay.
So by voting affirmatively for Fred's motion, we retain the
Retain.
language that's presently
Right.
in the charter.
Right.
Question.
Question is called. All those in favor?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Yeah, are there any other opposition votes? Will the secretary record that Ms. Parker opposes the motion? The motion was to retain the present, adopt the committee report, which would retain the present language. And the motion was passed.
Mr. Chairman, this moves us down to section 902, under the education article. The proposal is to add the wording immediately preceding the election, so that someone who lived in Anchorage 10 years ago and happened to move back couldn't run the school board. And it proposes to delete the reference to how the seat shall be filled, which really belongs in the transition provision anyway, because it's of transitory nature.
And this, Sherry, Sherry, what was this one that deletes the requirement for running again?
No, that would be transition.
No, that's, I move the adoption.
Moved,
902.
I'll second it.
moved by Mr. Sheffield, second by Mr. Chive, adoption committee report number 22, section 902, adding the words immediately preceding.
Should be immediately preceding the election, as true. The word "the election" should be underlined. The words "the election" should be underlined.
It should be the whole phrase immediately
Yeah.
preceding the election.
And deleting the sentence, 2 seats shall be filled at each general election after initial election under this charter, except that 3 seats shall be filled at the 78th general election and each general election every third year thereafter.
I have a question.
Ms. Angley?
The 2 months that Eagle River was not part of Anchorage, were they not residents of Ankles immediately preceding 1 year?
You have a thought, Jane.
Good legal one.
I really suppose that
Put
the
it-
courts will take care of that.
Mr.
Well,
The courts have taken care of it. They said that they haven't left ever.
Then they should have.
no, they didn't say that. No,
They
no,
didn't
no,
say
no.
that
In
because
fact, no.
otherwise they should have voted on the
If they
bond.
said
I
that, we would
don't-
have lost the
yeah.
case.
Yeah, that's
They
right.
said that they had never left ever and were deprived of the right to vote. Court said you did leave.
Yeah,
They did leave, but they
So-
came back.
all right.
So, Ms. Anglick's point is important because
Yes, it is.
literally it would mean that that they would be ineligible to run this fall, right?
Let's
That's
write
right.
it into the
Let's
transition.
put it in the
How will you
put it in the transition, Rick.
Yeah.
Put that in your notes. Get the
Temporary
transfer.
absence by dint of abortive failures to form
Borough.
Shall not count against
It shall not prevent you from running for the school board,
or the mayor, or the assembly, or those other seats.
running for elective office.
the residents.
Good point.
Good thought, Jane.
Oh, every now and again, one was such a brain.
Have another
You sure caught that one. Boy, wouldn't they have been peeved if they couldn't run for these things?
And they would have taken us to court again.
No intent, no intent.
Question.
Let's take care of it.
Question.
There's a motion before us, question has been called.
Mr. Chairman, before we dispense with this section, there is a policy question which we, I believe, did not consider last week concerning designated seats in the school board. We did have some testimony about that. I think we ought to at least bring it up for discussion.
Me too.
So I will move to amend 902 to provide for designated seats.
I'll second, but referring it to the section
Motion
901.
to amend 902 to provide for designated seats.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
It
it's
really
combined.
belongs in 901.
901, all right. Motion to amend 901 to provide for designated seats. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seconded by Ms. Parker, moved by Mrs. Holmes.
We went through this before the first draft came up, and the 71 charter did contain designated seats. There is some feeling that if you do elect to designated seats, you have a chance to run an actual campaign on issues and to debate with a particular candidate or a couple of particular candidates on the issues which, if you are running against an incumbent, you have a chance to look up the incumbent's record, and you don't have to run against 3 incumbents if there happen to be 3 seats open and you're running in an at-large undesignated election. I think the responsiveness to the voters is increased by having designated seats.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Cronin?
the ABEA, I think, spoke against designated seats, and as I understand, the real reason behind this is they like to short ballot so that they can control the school board election. And it just might be possible that that would be one reason why we might want to put it in there.
Do you want the ABA?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I vote for this motion, it won't be on that basis. The record reflects.
Might be one reason.
The argument, the other argument, of course, against it is that, and I just, we were discussing it in the spirit, mentioned a second, is that the voters lose the option of selecting perhaps their 2 favorite people because they're pitted against each other or because of the way the seat thing would fall.
But if there are only 2 good people, I mean, the problem as I see it when I face a school board ballot is that there are 3 seats open and there are 4 people running for
each of the 3 seats, I'm faced with such a multitude of choices that it becomes just ridiculous. And any concerted effort by one particular group to elect one particular candidate has a greater chance of success.
It is a matter of the plunk or short ballot. And it's also, it's also the matter of name identification. That I think the larger the field, the more candidates there are, the more name identification instead of issues prevails.
It does,
But
it does
hasn't
everything common.
Hasn't it been recently that there hasn't been a short ballot on the school board?
There has been. In the last couple of years, we've had a short ballot.
I would think,
There has been a what you speak of as short balloting. That is, you don't vote for as many people as you're allowed to vote for.
you know, vote for as many people, but geez, there's a lot of people running.
Ms. Hangby?
Well, the Rowan report indicates that this is a 50-50 issue out there, and probably we will incur the wrath of ADA and the school board, obviously, if we do go to designated seats. The argument that has been put forth by the proponents of at large is that the educational system is equivalent throughout the Anchorage area, and that
We're not talking about districting. They're still running at large.
I'm sorry, I'm
They're still running at large, but they're having
A designated seat.
specific seat.
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall ADA coming out strongly against.
Letter from Don Decker.
Was there?
Yeah, there was a letter.
Was it strongly opposing?
It just mentioned it. It mentioned it.
Well,
Is there further discussion on the motion? The motion being,
I'm not sure that that's a correct analysis of their interest, as a matter of fact.
I'm not sure that it is
Because once they get
unanimous
incumbents in,
by a long shot.
yeah, they like everyone else, deals with this name familiarity.
so the motion before the group is to amend section 901 as in the first draft to add designated seats.
Could I just add, Mike, was there a question on designated seats, or was there only a question on at-large versus at-large versus designated seats?
sorry, I'm sorry, I misinterpreted everything.
Chairman, the one other thing that occurs to me is that the ease of running and the cost of running a campaign might be reduced somewhat running for this county seat as opposed to such a large undesignated field. How do you do that?
Any further discussion
I disagree with that.
on the motion?
Because you still have to appeal to the voters at large.
But you can have small forums and actual meetings set up where the candidates running against each other confront each other, whereas you could not possibly schedule a debate of any kind with all the school board candidates confronting each other in a mass.
Question.
So you couldn't get into personality.
Question has been called. Roll call. Question. Mr. Cornell, you give a roll call, starting with,
Me. Handvick?
No, starting with Mary Froney.
Well, me. My turn.
Run it around.
Tony?
Yes.
Holm?
Yes.
Josephson? Yes. Parker?
Yes.
Reed?
No.
Sheffield?
Yes.
Hangvick?
Yes.
Chai?
Yes. The motion passed, and the committee will prepare wording for adding designated seats in section 901. Now, we didn't have a motion before it on approval of 902.
Yes.
Yes,
we
we
did.
did.
That was an amendment.
That was an amendment. Then the main motion is amended for approval
Well, let's just admit that because it's
of 22. As amended. Any further discussion?
question.
Questions called for? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion is passed. Adopted. Committee report 22 as amended by transition.
They were on the last page.
Mr. Chairman, in committee report 23 is a recommendation to delete that section since it has been covered in the general provision concerning vacancies. Move for adoption.
Second. Moved and seconded.
Question?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Committee report 23 has been adopted.
Mr. Chairman, on committee report 24, the proposal is to add the phrase, if the dollar amount is different. We in this section are proposing that there be two public hearings, one before the budget is submitted to the Assembly, and another one after the Assembly determines what their action is or takes action on the budget. And if the Assembly has cut the dollar amount or given them more money than they asked for, the idea would be that there would be a hearing to determine how it would be spent. That hearing would really be ridiculous if they didn't change the dollar amount any, because it would just be a rehash of the original hearing. So I move for approval.
I move for second.
Mr.
Seconded.
Chairman.
Approval of committee report number 24. Discuss open for discussion. Mary Fleming.
This says that the proposed budget and program should be approved and submitted to the mayor at least 120 days before the end of the current fiscal year of the municipality, and this was not the intent. It was before the 120 days before the new fiscal year of the school district or the school.
There has been discussion regarding that.
Did
I
we
know
talk to Tom Freeman
Yes.
regarding this section?
Yes.
Bob Nelson and Norm Levesque discussed this with Tom, and as I understand it, they came to an agreement and thought this was okay.
Now, the thing that they said was okay was in the finance section here, where we speak of the fiscal year for the municipality shall begin the first day of January and so forth, and the fiscal year of the school district shall begin on the first day of July. And the budgets should go to the assembly 120 days, the budget for the municipality other than the school district. This fiscal year for 1001 should change so that the budget for the municipality other than the school budget, you see. The idea is that the school budget comes in 120 days before its fiscal year, and that the rest of the municipal budget comes in 100 or whatever number of days that we've said before the municipality's new fiscal year.
And then because of the complexity of the financial things, Mary, could we research this, and if we
I
can?
have.
Well, I'd like to
You're welcome to re-research it.
Can I re-research?
You're welcome to re-research it, but I thought
Before making a change, to be sure?
I did it. If you wish to repeat it, go to it.
Well,
I went specifically to Norm and I said, we seem to be in trouble on when we're requiring the budgets to come before the assembly. And he said, I heard that you had misunderstood. He says, I have re-talked to Tom Freeman, and the way I proposed it to you, that you thought you had in the thing, was that it be before each is fiscal year, the school budget's fiscal year and before the assembly's fiscal year. He said, because you don't set your mill levy until June anyhow, it's possible to allow them to come in at a different time than the municipal budget, and it cuts your workload. And he's right. When we're trying to consider the school budget at the same time we're considering the assembly's budget, it is a hell of a load.
I just had comments phoned to me by Sheila Gallagher questioning the whole timing, and I wanted to be sure that we had all the input from all the meetings that they had.
Yes, it has been checked with both Tom Freeman and Sheila Gallagher, and when they understood that that was the intent that had been proposed by the Finance Department to the Charter, and that we were going to clear it up in the wording so that that was plain to everybody, they had no objections. It was when it was understood. Now, you're perfectly welcome to check back.
No, I just wanted to be sure that all of the meetings that they were holding had been...
Yes, there was...
Well, what let's do is change the wording then.
It needs to be...
We may, on this one,
and also...
let's not go on to the next one, let's do this one. The municipality to school, and then when the Charter Committee, Production Committee gets on to the next one, if there's any questions, when the final wording to be recommended to the full commission is completed, it should be checked with the, to see that it does meet what they hope to have. And when it is checked, then bring it back, and that will include checking this, make sure it jives with what they have to say.
So I would include in my motion the deletion of the word municipality and the substitution of the word school district.
Sure.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Motion is before us to adopt committee report number 24, section 907, adding the words if the dollar amount is different and changing the word municipality to school district. Is there any question? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is passed. Recommendation is adopted.
Can we have a brief recess?
Yes. Appreciate it myself.
Would it be best to collect those minutes back again and then have them read down and submitted next time for review?
Yeah, I suppose so. But if there's error already obvious in it, like, first, you don't mind my making a copy first, at least.
Send it to Republican National Committee.
I just pitched it up.
I have the record of that tape, too.
I wish you could, because it's human tape.
No, it was
I gave you mine. I think that's one is Newport.
Just the opposite.
I gave you mine.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. We actually got...
The day when I do my field on that subject, I explain myself as a authority on that subject at that time. I think that the whole concept of the Southwest Executive is absolutely anti-democratic. So I think that the whole concept of this one executive is absolutely anti-democratic. RCA is going to put in
yesterday.
my hotel.
When Congress enacted to veto Ford loan, there was a tremendous majority, but not quite two-thirds, and they couldn't make it. It was free democracy, and we elected King for 4 years. You know, the number of votes that are defeated, the number of leaders that are defeated are so few.
You know how it's worked here is
When the
just
Russians
the opposite.
I know it'll be done for
We have
He's coming in to
council less visible, who
Yeah, we're in it.
narrow
Right.
interests.
Attorney Fred. Most places.
It is favorable to a special interest based on years.
And if you had them for
60 days when we
When the public's quite unaware, get that.
if you had them running from single district, but elected
used to be how much money would you lose in the winter, so how long would
Well,
it
they're
take
responsible to
you
everybody.
July or August to make it
But
back?
you're talking about, I mean, I wouldn't object to that, but that's
All right.
not gonna.
I had the example of a couple of days ago. I introduced a friend to Thelma
The acreage is at
Lockhart.
No,
So here,
anymore.
the legislator in Juneau.
Well, you know, 71
And
it was.
first question was, well,
After
where
the
would
big
you
boom in
live?
70, we all got
Oh,
accustomed
that's
to
why
it.
she's
Everyone
not,
went to hell
she's not your legislator.
65 was that way after.
And that's it, you know, there's a loss of interest. She's not representing anymore.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That I kind of think may be a good idea.
All right.
What else we got?
If you've got everybody responsible for
Right, I
it,
guess Jane has her committee report.
and they're going to be watching
Is that gonna be long?
because they are responsible to everybody.
Well, it might be Pat, well, our committee.
You either one believes in the democratic concepts or does not, and I happen to believe in it. I believe in the parliamentary system, which was the initial concept of the nation. Strong legislators and with great fear of the executive. And I think we have good reason for that. Quite a bit in time.
Well, I'm going to go down
Could
and
have
play next week.
Oh, fish. Executive abuse has been the plight of people everywhere around the world.
Just I'll let you know.
Well,
I got a couple of spots.
a lot of government parliamentary system don't fare very
Yeah,
well.
the Kings are running.
Pretty good kings running down
And
there.
then along towards the end of the week
This
was
is
the
a dynamic community.
The old theory, right, that the amazing thing about democracy is not that doesn't work better, but that works at all.
Glacier Bay, way around.
Well,
It's not a thing.
I'm going to go down to Amgoon this time. I've never been to Amgoon. And I got a friend's got an old cabin just below Amgoon, so I think I'll stop this.
we agree on most things, but
That's only about 3 hours.
lucky fast. Look at that, I'm going to vote to see what the council manager come up with.
Got new engines in the boat.
And the manager.
They'll probably crap out on
No, it's the only way John would stand well. He said, yeah, in May, because they're brand new. You know, I've never,
cut the bugs out of them.
but the other ones have never failed me. The old ones either, you know, but they're getting noisy.
Yeah.
You know what sunburn on there, don't you?
Wrong, yes.
Have I? Yeah.
You know,
Must be sitting at the sun. Yeah?
select this guy
He better not go with
for your range.
trouble. Just wait for mama.
I'm not trying to persuade your mama. I was asking your mama's advice.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I was asking. I want your papa's advice, too.
We talked about this dinner. Yeah.
But I'm real curious to know what you folks decided to tell me.
No, I had
All right.
and there's a lot of ifs in my
Then you have one more check.
Around you?
How's your offer?
I asked because my mom and dad want to go up and eat. Brunch, there's brunch on Sunday.
Right.
Is it crowded?
It's been running pretty much at capacity. Turning
Can we make
people away.
reservations?
Yeah, that's the only way. Make reservations ahead of time.
Yeah.
The brunch isn't too bad. It's only, what, $7? That's a hell of a view
there. We used to drive up there, just drive up and
Yeah.
turn around.
But there's no food on the table, you're trying to tell us what there's a hell of a view, huh?
Hell of a view up there.
It's better than the Ye Public House. Too expensive there.
With no potatoes.
Mike, how you doing? Fine, sir. I thought I would observe the body in action once. Well, I hope you learned quite a lesson by watching. I always learn something. Particularly when I'm forced to keep my mouth shut and my ears open, that's when I learn the most. Whenever I have the opportunity to open my mouth, I have a tendency to put my foot in it. We've got some odd ones.
I often think of myself as an oracle. It does me good to just sit and listen.
I'd rather be an oracle. At least you express what you think, and that's it. Oh, yeah. Hell with them. They don't like it. God bless that way for a long time. Been known for that, too.
Oh, what?
What have you been doing? You've been pretty busy?
I've been practicing keeping out of public eye.
I thought maybe you're getting ready to make another run.
I thought.
Also, frankly, the conflict of interest on all as far as I'm concerned.
Damn paper piles up here just past you by here.
Oh, that whole thing's ridiculous. I mean, I just go ahead and ignore it. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Excellent. But I'm not going to be attempting to it.
The basic level of information that people in Anchorage have about the work of the Charter Commission is very low, and that if we have any stock in the work that we've been doing for the last few months, we also have the responsibility to tell them what we have done and what we have produced, and what kind of product we think would occur if the two governments were unified. And based on that we're talking about a public information campaign to let people know what we've done and what their options are. That the most important thing that we're talking about is almost like an education, because they don't know what we've been up to. And it's our responsibility to tell them that. This is different than what I would call a political hard sell of the Charter. Because we can't even sell the product now, they don't even know what it is. And what our primary responsibility is to let them know what we've accomplished. Let them know what the words say and what it means for their lives. The first question that Mike asked in his report is, have you read it? And it's an incredibly low percentage of people who have even read the document, in spite of the fact that it appeared in the paper. So that it's probably our responsibility to tell them that such a document exists, what the words are, what the content of it are, and what that means to them. The major issues that evolve about that appear to be, or the biggest fear is that this was supported both in the first survey and in the second one. First fear is that you're going to get a great big government. It's going to be very large and probably very expensive. So you have to deal with the question of, is it going to become a big, large complex, or is it something that people can still relate to? The second thing that people are fearful of, and we have our own fears about it among the commission, is it going to be, what's the money? Is it going to be more expensive? Is it going to be less expensive? And at some point in time, we're going to have to figure out something to tell the people out there about what the effect of this government will be related to their taxes. Probably the third major issue is the responsiveness. Is there any way that we can get a two-pronged effort that says, at the same time that we're eliminating duplication and trying to make government only one mayor and only one assembly, that we're centralizing it
so that there's lack of duplication. We're also pushing that we want it to become a responsive unit through the provisions of community councils and ombudsman. That it doesn't necessarily have to be bigger, it'll just be one with the tentacles of decentralization at the neighborhood level. So these are the major issues. So they're Eagle River, is it going to get bigger and is it going to have more staff? Is it going to be more expensive? And can it be responsive? These are the four basic issues that we looked at and trying to figure out ways to address those particular concerns to residents in Anchorage. We have lots of options available to us, I think, and so does the committee ran the gamut from newspaper to radio to TV and how to try and get an integrated package together. Pat has put together, as a result of those conversations, a basic outline of options that the commission has in pursuing it. At this time, do I want to give it to Pat to explain his memo to us? Yeah, okay.
Fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James, I place this through the chairman to you. And do you want me to go through it, or we just give them time to look at it?
I think it'd be good for you to go through it. As you go through it, they can be following you, and if questions arise, we need to go back.
Okay. I'll just start with number one on the media kit, which is, let's say, press kit or media kit. I'd like to expand it to a media kit rather than leaving it on the term press. And this would provide background of all of you, which would be on hand each time that they had questions about the commissioners and wanted to relate some background. Also, some kind of a close-up type photograph of each one of you in action. Now, I realize we don't have a camera. We may need to...
Nobody recognize me.
We may need to have a camera of some kind or find someone who's got that kind of service.
I think we can find a volunteer for that. I'll do a little looking.
There are a couple of things intertwined here. Statement of purpose, what is being planned for, and what is it for relates directly to the charter and the fact that if we give them a concise one-page definition of what is the purpose of the charter as it goes on, that can be a working statement that they can refer back to. It's a peg point in their press kit, in the media kit. There's a progression chart, which all of you, I believe, have a copy of, a working progress chart. And we'd want to go ahead and further that and show the media where we are, what we hope to be doing and accomplishing, and gives them a chance to see what's on down the road. A statement of what is being done, that's a basic thing. What is being done as soon as we had finished the charter itself and we've gone ahead and proposed placement on the ballot, then what is being done regarding the charter. Questions and answers, which I'd like to rely on the commission and maybe the group that's been working on the revision of the charter itself for questions and answers and some key things that you feel the media people would like to have at their disposal. Things that the charter answers. Maybe some of those things we've answered now that we've been coming back to this group and changing the wording, but we've answered some of the questions the public has had at the commission meetings. And then I left G as a copy of the revised and final charter, which hopefully will be soon. And if we can have that in their hands before the time it gets to the borough clerk for publication in the newspaper, well, this will give them a working opportunity to have it to refer to all the paper. Do you have a question?
Yeah, ready to drink.
Wait till we get the camera.
We're glad it isn't present tonight.
The additional aid materials is kind of like a miscellaneous fund in a slush fund, I guess you might call it. Just for any other ideas that may come in that we could put in there.
On number 2, I chose to call it an activity line, and I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but it's merely a device that can be hooked up through our telephone unit. And we can play, as I've written down here, we can play comments or news briefs or announcements of meetings or things of that nature directly to the radio and TV stations. We can hook it up and arrange it so that if they call in at a given particular point in time and there's nobody here, could be in the middle of the night, we can leave a message on it and they'll go the other way. Maybe they can trigger it and they can get the message from us when we're not here. That I'd like to look into and see if maybe the borough has something along that line in the city, and if not, maybe we can find if that exists here in town. If anybody has any thoughts on that, let me know. It gets into schedules, appearances, activity, what's happening with the commission. That's one of the key questions is, well, what's going on? We've elected a commission who know they're doing their job, but what job are they doing? What is going on? What's taking place? Maybe if we can get this kind of an action into the media, the people will begin to really take interest. Graphics would include slides and charts, graphs, things of that nature. Some of these things I can work on directly. I have no basic working knowledge in creation of slides or in plastic graphics or things of that nature. But I would be happy to work with someone if we could find somebody of this caliber that works on that. And also in talking with a couple of commissioners, I see some sparkling ideas that we can use that would graphically depict some of the questions that we're talking about. We mentioned the one on the budget and the mill rate, and win or lose, who's going to have what. And Mary came up with an idea tonight.
And the commission getting out of the cab.
That's a great.
Yeah.
Lights blowing.
Lights blowing.
Do we get the option of the cab we ride in?
all 11 commissioners in a cab, and when we reach the city borough line, we all pile out of that one cab into another one.
A good reason for having a new government.
You know, I'd like to see if the charter is coming alive, it would be really helpful to see it come alive in an informative manner. And I'd like to see that that's kind of a positive approach to making it come alive. Suggestion for a logo, heaven knows what kind of a logo we could have, but something may depict two entities becoming one, or
I'll just tell you one that happened to me the other night. I was coming down C Street about 11:30 at night, and I was rolling along about 50 miles an hour. And as I come over the hill, there's a police officer parked over the side. Well, I slowed down actually a little bit, but I didn't want to be too obvious. I was slowing down with a sudden jerk. I went on down the street. He pulls out behind me. And he pulls up behind. Of course, I pulled over to stop. He came over and he was very kind to me. He said, "Well, you're doing 51, but I'll give you a ticket for 50 because at 51 you have to appear in court, and at 50 you don't." Well, that's great, but Maxine's sitting over here making all kinds of remarks.
You weren't driving
somewhere along the way, she said something about, "Oh, you've been working late on the Charter Commission or something." And police officer went back to the car, didn't call me back or anything. He went back and filled out some papers and brought them back up to me and handed it in, had me sign acknowledging he said, "How is the charter coming?" I said, "Well, just great." He says, "Well, it sure got to pass this time."
He says it's going to pass.
He says he's got to. He says he's got to.
We could always go with my maintenance man who know nothing.
If we develop a logo early,
If I could stop that way, I'd probably lump that we're going to have a civilian police review board.
If he doesn't sign a ticket, don't you sign a ticket. Really, I mean that. You know, they give you a ticket and they ask you to sign it, but he won't sign that ticket. But don't get caught on that one. Don't sign the ticket unless he signs it.
Is that advice from your attorney?
No, I just went through it with the state police on that deal. where I was stopped and they signed a ticket, but the ticket wasn't signed by the office. It's a citation. And I argued it had to be signed by whoever's citing me. And they threw it out.
Better go get my $35 check back. Oh, I'm sorry to...
No, we may use a police billy club for our logo. But in any event, we have, if we're going to do a logo, we have a need to do one early so that we can get it on everything that we're involved in so that it becomes an identifiable entity. And a thought, which is an excellent one, is for a workshop, or possibly two, but basically one workshop where the commission gets into an interchange, not only with itself, but with citizens of the community, discussing the new proposed charter as has been amended or will have been amended by that time. And during that session, whether it's a 2-hour or a 6-hour, have some kind of a videotaping take place, which would capture those key conversations where the points in the charter are really clarified, where there's a good dialogue back and forth between two people, or 3 or 4 people. And utilizing then those strips of tape for news purposes, or for maybe a partial on a program where we're presenting both sides of the charter itself, also using the audio off of that into the radio broadcasting stations, and perhaps maybe even dovetailing the information off of that into the print media, so that we're looking for a good explanation and a good example of the pros and the cons of the charter itself. The basic thing is to inform, to let people know that this exists to these points through this way. The Speakers Bureau you have a common working knowledge of. This is where your charts will come in again. Oh, by the way, back on the workshop, the videotape would be something that I think would be an additional cost for us. And this would be something that we would have to look around and see if we can, as a public information committee, can come up with somebody here who can do this, who's available. The Speakers Bureau would utilize the charts and the graphs and the slides and the logo and whatever other aids we have. Forthcoming, I would hopefully like to think in terms of having a couple people, and this comes direct from the committee, thinking of having a couple people each time from the commission go out and make an appearance. It serves a good purpose in dual dialogue. It also gives an idea to us through those two, or through to the commission through those two, and how the people are thinking, how they feel, what it is they're asking, whether they're getting the information, if they still have a void in the information. While one is talking, the other one can kind of assess the audience, things like that. The community forum is another thought that comes to mind, and I would think that it would be possible with your permission to talk with some of the television stations to see if there's a chance that we can set up a community forum involving all of you in a telephone two-way for an hour's broadcast time. And this would be involving questions and answers, possibly up toward the last week or 2 or 3. And if we can do that, and if we can involve the commissioners and we can utilize the telephone and we can work in the broadcast media in this manner, we have a chance to answer questions, we have a chance to involve commissioners, and we're telling the story, and I don't know of anybody more qualified to tell the story than all of you, especially in the media. This would be something that perhaps maybe we could ask both mayors to participate in too as moderators, and give us a little opportunity to have them answer a few items they may have too. That's item 7. I think my numbering is amiss. We skipped from 7 to 9. I dropped an 8, I guess. Page 4 is a brochure, and I'm unsure on whether or not a brochure in the Eagle River area is the best approach or the only approach. And I'd kind of like to go over that just a little bit more, but there is a thought that maybe a brochure would be good just in that area specifically to answer the conflict question and to subcommittees regarding the goals of the Charter Commission as opposed to their goals there. And the proposed charter itself, and I believe Sherry brought this forward, was in Title 29, is that right, Rick? Where the charter will be printed through the borough clerk, so we don't have to go to that expense to have it publicized or published.
The borough clerk is required by Title 29 to publish the charter. We may wish to do an additional publication. I think we need to explore with the clerk what kind of publication she intends. Maybe combine expenses with her, or if we can get her to do it, that would be great.
And we could pay for extra copies of it probably, as we did for the last one.
That's a thought.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some kind of a booklet that could be retained, so it's easier to handle than the big newspaper.
Something
Around
like,
Frank, don't you think?
yeah, I think possibly.
Companies might be
Get some of the
encouraged to-
companies in the community to take a front page and back page or something and go ahead.
This charter brought to you by
Anchorage
Lauren
Times.
Lonsberry and the Anchorage Times. There we go.
Charter of Anchorage by First National Bank, Alaska Bank of Commerce, National Bank of Alaska, so on down the way.
and we could have little numbered pages in there
Don't forget
and have a
Fictitious
special
Bank.
drawing.
This page supported by
Frank, don't forget the Fictitious Bank.
No, don't leave it out.
Yeah, Security National.
Conflict.
11 is just for your information, really. And at this point, these are things that hopefully maybe you'll consider looking at it and saying, yes, let's go, or take 2 or 3 or all 11 of them. Some are in progress as far as actual day-to-day activity. And at the bottom, I'd like to have about maybe, well, we have 8 here tonight, maybe we can have 8 new ideas in addition to what we already have.
I like Mary's idea about the taxi cab.
That wasn't my idea. That was somebody else's. Was that Frank's?
You know, you may laugh at that, but you know, we sit here, and you don't realize it, how disinterested the public is in this kind of thing. You made the comment that they didn't read the charter. Don't think somebody's going to sit down and read 4 pages of newsprint and read this charter. People vote in image, they never vote in issue.
So we gotta have good image.
That's what you're fooling with the majority, is how good you're. And people like the abnormal. The idea of getting into a cab and changing it to city line to the borough line and taking another cab leaves a greater impression on a voter than sitting down and talking about recall action and referendum, which are strange words to him. He could care less. That's why he's got a charter commission. You guys fan on that out. But it's an image type thing.
That particular point is one that was, I think, borne out in the survey that Mr. Rowan has done. Maybe if I may, Mr. Chairman, turn it into Mr. Rowan's hands for a minute or two, and he can maybe talk on his report, possibly just briefly, and also talk on an idea or two on how to implement a couple of these.
Mr. Rowan?
I think almost everything's covered. The report went into possible charter production issues and revealed nothing surprising in terms of suggesting changes, with the single exception, I think, of the preamble. I don't know what you've done with that.
We'd be happy to show you. We sort of took the suggestion.
We put waste in the preamble.
Waste and duplication.
So that
To eliminate waste and duplication.
oh, well, that's the it's a very interesting thing to substitute those words, to have people choose and then ask why they were voting, because it did change 35% of the voter attitude towards the preamble. And I agree with Brent that the likelihood of people walking in to a 4-page document is to resolve the issue by reading the preamble and voting.
So I think the preamble is important. Now, in terms of the other issues, I think they were raised well by Jane. There's a tremendous information problem out there. I think the easiest, simple sentence to describe the information problem is that there is no information on the charter existing in the public. And it's minimal. Two-thirds, or almost two-thirds of the people we spoke to said that even though they were inclined to vote for the charter at the moment, that they would be, they wanted more information prior to doing so, before casting that vote. And based on that and other instincts that when we were present, we began talking about the information program. I'd like to recommend that the information program go towards the issues that Jane was raising. This is a difficult area for you because the charter has words in it that have meaning, which are legal, and because they are written as a constitution, the point is not made as in conversation. And so the charter does not reveal itself, let's say, from first reading about what it means. And the things that people are wondering about in terms of taxes or responsiveness or the legal of the situation or whatever are questions, I think, that have to be addressed in some meaningful way. Now, there are already people in the community who are addressing the whole community about these questions. The Commission is not one of the parties to that conversation just yet. But there are people with great interest in your charter and in defeating it. Without taking a position, it seems to me the Commission, through what Pat is proposing, can invite people who have an opposing point of view, or a point of view that may agree with a member or a majority of the members of the Commission, to come into the format created by this news feed operation, which is television, radio, and print mechanism, for the purpose of increasing the amount of information available to people and to raise the level of information to the point where it's appropriate for people to vote, and where you don't find in research that two-thirds of the people are saying I need more information before I can cast that vote. I think you escape totally the fairness doctrine question or the equal time provision question by inviting anybody who has a position in opposition or pro or con, positive or negative, special interest or general interest, into your format, where you take your position, and there are a lot of different positions around the table, and where you edit your material and you produce your own debates, your own forum, your own discussions, which includes arguments that some of you may agree with and arguments that some of you may disagree with, and you put this material out for the purpose of enlivening the discussion and bringing this information level up to a point where you're happier with it. So I was happy with this Pat's memo because it responds perfectly to the findings of the survey. I think it's a huge problem, and that from here on out, with the single exception of a few changes I'll make in the charter, this is a communications effort, an information program effort that you're in, and it's a long road and a long way to go, because I couldn't agree with you more, Fred. It's a boring subject for most people, although incredibly important to them.
So we've got to, it seems to me, go into the media which are most convenient to them, which is basically television and radio, and not leave out any other media, but you've got to prepare as much material for those people as you can to make it convenient for them to run your material. And I've had assurances from television stations and radio stations here that if this commission, like the Site Selection Committee, which I also work with, were to bring materials, like videotape materials produced out of fairness and subject to their judgment, to the stations, that indeed they'd play them, even if it were a half-hour film or a one-hour videotape coming out of a workshop or some such program. Now, all these things are, I think, really essential for the resolution of your problem. And I think that's what we should talk about now.
Mr. Chai, is this all donated by the stations, the time that would be used and all that, or would we have to pay for it?
I wouldn't pay for any time. I mean, as a matter of public policy,
Right.
I would just say you're not paying for public time. But on the other hand, the radio stations and the television stations are more than willing to give a certain amount of time for public affairs, and they already do. And CBS here, for example, is at a level that's almost 3 times over the requirement by the FCC for fairness and equal time. But for public time, excuse me. But when you approach these people on this question, there are certain things they can give away easier than they can give other things away. They can give away a half hour better than they can a 30-second prime time slot. It's cheaper. So that's what we were thinking in terms of these videotape materials, is what you do. You go into a workshop. It's true that there are some costs in terms of getting some people who are skilled at videotaping to come in and film such a workshop. It's too bad Arliss is not here, because she just took part in such a thing in Palmer and was very pleased with it, with the Site Selection Committee. And in that kind of thing, you come out with like 4 hours of videotape material. And at that point, you're going to have some very interesting things and some uninteresting things from a television point of view. And as you begin editing, culling those things out, you can go to the station and say, look, we have a very interesting 5-minute piece that we could put together, which involves the Charter Commission on the question of Eagle River. And it's 8 people taking a position and getting in a conversation on this. Do you want it? You know, if we produce it, will you run it? And if so, when? And then you schedule it, and then you do it, if they will.
Well, the only thing is we have to be a little careful, because we're using public funds, and we could be criticized for very lavish productions with public funds to peddle this thing, couldn't we?
This is a different than an advocacy position, Fred. This is an informative campaign and not a advocate saying
if we started spending $50,000, $60,000 on production costs and all that, I think we'd be
we're not talking about that.
No, wait, look, for example, Tim McGinnis came forth with an unsolicited proposal to the Commission, proposing a half-hour film in which the notion that he had was that each of the commissioners would be filmed on basic issues in personal conversation with him. And then he would edit this out so that, like the whole commission would take positions on 4 or 5 issues. And of course there'd be differences in opinion, so there would be a sense of debate and so on. And his cost for that was like $7,000. But I'm not proposing going into film at all. I think it would be done cheaper in videotape. You get into one room, you edit straight from the videotape. And the budget of the videotape crew, which was a 3-camera crew that went to Palmer for the Site Selection Committee, and which is editing right now a half-hour piece, a 10-minute piece, a 5-minute piece, 10 one-minute pieces, a couple of 30-second pieces for distribution in the Anchorage media market in the next 10 days. The whole process of that costs, under $5,000. So I think videotape is the answer, in terms of the cost.
Chairman,
Lattice production.
should we go videotape? I think we should try and plug into some of the Charter Production Committee kind of sessions too, as they work. If we had planned it ahead, I think we probably should have taped one of our public hearings.
I think so,
Or if we have a workshop, it would be like a public hearing in that respect.
That's the idea.
Why do that? We can listen more.
What do you do?
I think
What we'd like to
Jane,
Confirm.
Jane?
I think probably the most important that what we're doing is explaining that there's 11 people here and we've all got different ideas and we know there are people out there who have different ideas that we are. And what we're trying to do is get the public involved in the discussions that we've been having among ourselves, so that when you raise a question of public funds, to me, it's our public obligation, or it's our obligation to the public to let them know that this is the subject we're talking about, and these are the different kinds of opinions that we've had on it. If we can all agree on a few basic ideas.
Well, I think you hit what I was going to say right at the end, and that is, as a commission, we have to present a very solid front. And if some of us start getting on media, and one is talking one way and one is talking another one, we're going to rip ourselves apart and lose credibility. So we better all be talking out of the same hymnal.
Mr. Chairman, we identified at the beginning of our process that we had a block of people who favored the unification of the two governments. And we all realized that when we presented to the public a particular document which of necessity took stands on the various issues, that we would gradually erode away our support because we had things that people could pick at. Now, I think what we need to do is bring to the community an awareness of what the critical areas are, that there are choices, and that while they don't agree with all the choices, as we in the commission have not agreed as we've gone along with all the choices, that we made choices and brought it together in a comprehensive whole and now have a document that can work. But if we don't educate the community that there were these choices, that we made the choices, and that even though they don't agree maybe with one particular part of the charter, it still does not negate the charter.
Okay,
one of the things
suggest.
Mr. Parker?
I wanted to ask Pat how he would make the charter come along so that it wouldn't be going forward.
Sherry just answered that. If that's what you're asking. I think Sherry's point is 100%.
Thank you.
It really is. And that's how you make it come alive, by this dialogue and this exposure to both sides of the facts, both sides of the story. Just like you sitting and discussing a point in 403 and somebody else taking the other side of 403, pretty soon there's this back and forth, and pretty soon you both say, well, okay, yeah, that sounds good, because you've come up with a third thing between the two of you. And this is the kind of thing that starts to jump out, and people look and listen, and then they say, hey, yeah, that's an answer. And then boom, it's
Mr.
right.
Chairman,
Tony?
one of the things that I think that we need to answer when we have these discussions as to pro and con, I think that we should always end up by pointing out to the people how easy or how hard it will be to modify the document if folks don't like some particular part of it. And the fact that there may be one or two places that they really don't agree with, that they should remember that the aim of the community was to try to come up with something better than either we have, and that because they don't fully agree with it should not be reason for losing their real aim and objective, that it would be possible to amend.
Mr. Todd? public debate's a wonderful thing, but it's a very dangerous thing unless you're adroitly expert at it. A good politician can shred you to pieces.
This is the point of videotape, though, that you edit and put it out as sure, here are the different sides of this issue, and this is what we decided after those points of view are presented.
Ms. Parker?
Yeah.
Sherry's right that, talking and stuff like that and getting two sides is, terrific and it's interesting. It's only interesting to those who like to listen to it and who are interested in think that, the graphics and the logo are going to really be important even if we're going to videotape something that, we don't just strictly go with, if we do a 30-minute spot, that we don't just strictly go with debate and that throughout it, that there is, a shot of something or other, or, that we put the logo in every here and there.
We could interpose a taxi cab incident
Yeah.
in the middle.
You could all have
Taxi cab
Jane.
logo on.
Some of us could wear them.
Well,
I think I think one of the things that we talked about in the community is there will be people out there shooting at us. There's no doubt about it. Al was already done. Hello.
she's
But,
Daily News.
and that they'll find their public forum to say whatever they want to say. And I think that if we could be in conversation with them at the same time that they're saying whatever they're saying, that we're saying whatever we can, that we could perhaps counteract something immediately as it occurs. And some of us will, for sure, Fred, some of us are going to be much better at political debates than others. But I think we have a lot of humanness in this group. And it might be
You're
kind of,
dreaming.
I think if it all looked like a bunch of very straight business people in coat and ties having a political discussion, but kind of a lot of color among us.
That's what I'm saying.
I precisely.
What I'm saying is, let's get off this cloud nine and get down to what the public will really buy. And,
Make it in black and white.
yeah.
If they're going to run their campaign, I think it would be better if we were running ours at the same time.
Their campaign is running right now.
I'm aware.
Their campaign is running right now. You got the Chamber of Commerce that's surveying its membership, some 750 of them, because of a position we've taken, which is going to come in against us strong. You've got Bill Baxter and these people that are getting up quite a strength. I'm a little surprised at Rowan's comment about Eagle River, that people in Anchorage are supporting Eagle River, because I'm finding just the opposite. I'm finding people in Anchorage are saying the hell with them. Let them go their way. So I'm a little surprised at your comment that you're saying there's a lot of support in Anchorage for Eagle River.
Could we all agree, for example, to say that it is not the intent of the Charter Commission to prevent Eagle River from pursuing whatever course they want?
I think that
If we
Don't
could-
dignify your enemy, just
Mr.
leave it
Chair,
alone.
What's before
Don't
us?
dignify it.
Is the question on approving this report so that they can go, the committee can go forward? Well, then I move to approve the report.
Second.
I don't want to be approved the report.
Let's make it unanimous.
It's a general report. You can't get hurt by approving it.
we have,
all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Mr. Rowan?
One of the factors involved in going ahead with that is, of course, money. And I know that that's very deep in the thing. And this whole thing could be budgeted out. And I think it should, at this point, now we've gone ahead with that, because I don't think a lot of money is being hoped for here. But there
Chairman?
So that's something that would be budgeted.
Mr. Chairman, I think that we asked Pat to look into that from the Publications Committee and come back to us with some sort of an idea as to how much we could get donated by people in the community, rather than our setting up a budget and going from there. We spoke to it.
Mike, there's a couple of people setting up committees to defend unification, like Millett Keller and whatnot. Why can't those people raise the necessary cash and the money at work? I mean, that gets a stigma off our backs.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's the real key to this notion. It's possible that if the commission feels that that your charter was to prepare but not present the charter, then your work is finished. Okay? But and we know the charter is prepared. We have evidence. And we know it hasn't been presented. We have evidence. Right? So the question is, who's going to present the charter? Now, there are pro-committees and there are anti-committees for whatever reasons. They have special interests in it or whatever. And what I would do with this mechanism is invite them in here. Say, don't raise any money. This is a public debate. You come in here. You sit down with Joe Josephson or the chairman or whatever. The two mayors, bring in Mr. Jordan, bring in Millett Keller, and make him part of this whole production. Make him part of the debate, because he's raised himself. They've surfaced. They've become real. And don't have them spend any money. Don't have them raise money to feed it. Give them a forum. That's what they want. They want access to the public. Let's give it to them and get in that debate, because there's a basic strength here. There's a strength among 66% of the people right now, an inclination to vote for. And you've got a very basic thing to say to those people, but you don't have a forum. And I feel that you ought to take the opportunity not only to make a forum for yourself, but for everybody. And if someone's opposed to you, bring them right in, and let's get it on, because I think the arguments of the Commission are stronger, actually, than the arguments against. I feel particularly that way about the Eagle River question, which is very badly misunderstood by the Anchorage public.
Mr. Josephson?
Well, Mr. Chai raised a valid point, I think, to this degree, that is it not true that there is sensitivity in the public to what is perceived as a public expenditure to sell a charter?
Right.
And so what I think you were proposing, what was proposed here, let me put it this way, your proposal kills two birds with one stone, so to speak, because you see it as the most effective way of getting unification, but it avoids, at the same time, the implication that it's a campaign, a one-sided campaign. Is that correct?
There's no campaign.
Should some of these committees want to separately do advocacy positions one way or the other?
You can't
That's
control.
right. That's Parker.
But aren't what we're doing is presenting both sides of the, like both sides of the coin? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? And I don't see where we should join up with any committee to, spend their money. We're not taking a side. I wouldn't want to spend some committee's money.
No, I don't think we should spend their money.
No, I didn't say we should spend their money. I said let them spend the money. All I'm trying to do is avoid, we're talking unification, duplication, we're going to save a lot of money. And if I were on the enemy side, I'd turn around and say, well, look, you're spending all kinds of money.
Information. We're only giving information.
Yeah,
we're
but
not taking a position.
politically, if somebody wants to make something up, they can twist it very quickly on
But
you.
if we present both sides, then we aren't taking a position.
Well, of course, I think we really have to address that again, because I think there's a fellow named Gravel, Mike, who ran that kind of stuff, where he'd have somebody come in and he'd feel, huh? Yeah. Deniability, right? No. But the theory of that campaign was to have people, make charges about, nominating yourself for office, and then he'd respond. In one school of thought, he was giving
his opposition chance with his money to make a point against him. But it was always couched in a way where he had the last word, and usually the most effective word.
Right. So, yeah, of course it's right. And that entire thing was produced for effect. But the difference was, while we produced, and I did this myself, while we produced the entire Gravel campaign, the whole effect of that campaign was to get him reelected. It's a partisan campaign. We never invited C.R. Lewis into any of our material. Okay? We never did anything live. We produced it. So what I'm proposing here, I'm proposing opening a forum in which people who are opposed and who may be way more powerful and who may win the issue, okay? There's no question it's risky. Is it more risky to do this or to do nothing? Are you going to let the presentation be put in the hands of people who only have a special interest, or do you people have an interest in seeing that this thing gets presented at least in an area where there's pro and con, as opposed to just negative? So that's what we're talking about.
I think basically we're to the point where we'll have to get some information as to cost. We've got Pat and Jane and program and how it would work and timing, and ask them to come back with a report.
Well, I think we're going to have to obviously, Mike, see more detail of what the format was going to be, because the thing that just disturbs me a little bit is that we would be providing, creating a forum where our opposition would come in. That's fine. And I agree with you that our arguments are better, and not only that, because we've worked so long with this, we can probably deal with the subject matter better than these other people can. But when you finish with that, what do? Just sign off and say you've heard both sides of the story, good night? Or do you find charter, will you have members of the commission urging people to support unification? And if you do the latter, what is this? Where are we with the problem Mr. Chai raised?
I don't think we do the latter. No.
I don't think we do it.
We just inform them when the vote on the charter is going to be and where they can contact us if there are further questions. We do support the charter, but we don't spend public money to tell them that we support the charter.
But,
Maybe we don't in the end.
Well, I think you're overcomplicating this, Joe, because this thing is much simpler. All of you already have a position on the charter, and you already have a position on all kinds of pieces of the charter. I've been watching the debate here for 3 months on this question. You can't tell me that's not the case. That's true. So all I'm saying is that the discussions you've had in public, are you afraid to have them read in public? I mean, the fact of the matter is there's no way to get people in this room. But there is a way to get this room in their room. That's all I'm saying. We have a technology here and a capability, and we'll spend a little money, but obviously not a lot, to maximize the discussion that's been in the commission, in the community. And why? Because the community says in 2/3 of the cases that it needs more information before it'll cast the vote. So that's what you're talking about. Now, what are the alternatives? Do nothing and form a committee and raise money in the community and produce television spots, which don't include the opposition, but make your point if you agree. That means you probably have 4 or 5 people here organize one committee, 4 or 5 organize another committee, you have a Chamber of Commerce organize a committee, you have Eagle River, Millet, Keller, everybody will spend their own money, right? And it's all a waste of time. The commission, if it's going to present the charter, I think, present both sides and take your position.
So how many of these forums are you going to have? You're going to have one every night?
Oh, no. What we're thinking of is in the thing that Pat put together, a basic television package that would come out of the workshop notion. One live program in television, probably the last week before the election to stimulate interest, that we have the 2 mayors and a kind of phone-in operation and that kind of thing. And then the maximization of
the existing media now. You know, let's get a radio thing in here so we get something to say, we get it out. And that's pretty much
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of the hour, I'd kind of like to perhaps do some more discussing of this.
But can we do pat correction?
Well,
We already
I thought we did.
But then we're contradicted.
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't. No, we haven't. Okay.
I think we can close it out now and ask Pat and Jane to put something together. Perhaps Mike will be available to assist him and need it. And we'll go on. Is there any other business to come before the
Can I just
Jane?
say one more thing? I think that vital to the whole public information program is the commitment of all the commissioners to participate. And that I just ask all of you to think about that, because that might mean putting yourselves in peculiar situations where you're debating an issue that you may not want to be, or doing stuff with cameras or something like that. And I really strongly feel that we need everybody to be participating.
Can I ask that before our Thursday night meetings, that we get the charter production committee reports for stuff that we'll be talking about at the Thursday meeting?
We had our last charter production meeting until 1:30 this afternoon, and the material wasn't published until 5:30 tonight.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think the suggestion should be implemented if possible. Now, with Mrs. Antek joining us Monday, it might be possible to make a distribution Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. But the point is that we can't, as Sherry says, can't guarantee that the up current to everything that you'll get Thursday night, because we may want to keep working into the last minute. We'll try to
Other commissioner
comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
I would like to bring it up one last time. I think that even though it would cause a overlapping, I think it is desirable to bring it to the vote on August 12th and to work like heck this week and get there. And I'm not sure that it still isn't possible so long as we requested the Monday night to put it on.
Mary, it has to be advertised completely and distributed 35 days prior to the August election.
Does it have to be advertised 35 days previous?
It has to be advertised, and the distribution has to begin, and that means that it
I
would
thought
have
it was
to
10 days before the election that it had to be published.
That's just in Title 29, but the borough requires 35 days.
Only has to publish the election. It doesn't have to publish the charter.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Josephson?
Next Thursday is July the 3rd, and I understood that there might be some commissioners who wanted not to meet on Thursday, July the 3rd. It might...
It's a reasonable assumption, I guess, if they want to go out to the lake or something.
And there are really two ways we could do this. We could either have a meeting earlier in the week next week, or two meetings the following week, and finish up this redraft. If we did that, then we could clearly get material well in advance of the meeting to the members of the commission. The charter commission of the production committee could work all week. But we could do it either way, whatever the preference is, but I think that Thursday night might be good.
Well, I would prefer to see it, I would prefer to see it hold a Wednesday night meeting rather than try to hold two the following week. I don't know how, Jerry, how about you?
I could meet meet on Tuesday night or Thursday night of next week? I have
Can't meet on Wednesday night because I just changed the meeting from Thursday night because you said you were going to meet on Thursday night to Wednesday night.
Well, I know the folks.
Could we meet on Tuesday night?
Tuesday's fine for me.
I can meet on Tuesday.
Tuesday's all right.
Yes.
Tuesday.
Well, you'll be here Tuesday.
Won't be here.
Come back. Not at all.
Well, you'll have to fly back for it.
What's the
that's
next
all.
one?
You'll have to fly back.
Yeah, you know, I'm in the mood to have commissioners that don't appear at meetings resign and let us put an Eagle River person on. I already said that in committee.
Did you really?
Yeah, I have.
Did we get a final report from Piedmont Financial on the financials, or what's happened with that?
It wasn't directed to him.
What's the
Well, the
status?
status of that is that the production committee will be bringing in Piedmont and Mitchell for a work session.
So we don't have any more information.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to complete my discussion. As I understand it, the requirement of the borough is only for the advertisement of the election. It is not, the requirement for publication is, according to statute 29, I believe 10 days before the election. I don't think it speaks to 35 days before the election that you have to publish the second version of the charter.
You know, we've been discussing for 3 weeks. We really ought to find out.
I really think that the difference...
That's a clever thought you got.
Mary, I checked with
Gotta make
Mary
it 3 hours
Coffey.
on this one subject.
I checked with Mary Coffey, and it takes 35 days by borough ordinance that you must do the advertising and make available the material that's going to be on the election. It has to be done by ordinance, or by resolution by the assembly, and a copy of the charter should go to the assembly with the resolution asking them to set the date, Mary said. She said to be safe and to be sure that we don't have any court challenges of what we're doing, we should add on the 10 days statutorily required by Title 29, which means it all has to be done by this Monday, at the latest by July 8th, which is a week from Tuesday. That's the 35 days.
All right, I think we can do it by a week from Tuesday.
Mrs. Fuller, will you make a motion, please?
I would like to make a motion that we get on the ball and get it there by the week from Tuesday, that I think the difference in the month on the election is very critical.
On the basis that we got a lot of opposition voting?
I don't think we should give more time for opposition to the bill.
You may have a point.
That's
You
my
may have a
motion
point.
if I've got a second.
Second.
You may have a point.
Seconded. We
And I feel we can do it if you're...
step up production and if possible get completed by time for...
Well, the way we can do it, Frank, is
Just get at it.
whatever the production committee comes up with, that's final. Let's not nitpick it. Let them be the judges.
There are not. I have looked through this evening when I came early, and there are not a great many more places until we come to the transition article that we need to make any major changes.
That's one
And I think,
person's opinion.
I don't think there are any, that's right, it's one person's opinion. I don't think there are any great number of major changes that are going to require, except for the transition. Now, I'm admitting that the transition is going to take a whole lot of work.
Mr. Chairman, we met every day this week in charter production to get through article number 9. And there is no way
Two of
we
those
can
have got back.
do it.
I'm back.
Absolutely no way.
I think there is.
What the motion is to finish the production by when?
By the 8th.
The
A
8th
week
of
from Tuesday.
a week from Tuesday.
By the 8th. That probably means that we don't take a 4th of July weekend, but if your 4th of July weekend is more important than getting it on the month earlier, that's up to you.
Mary, isn't your motion really to go to an August date?
Yes, it is.
And isn't it really to ask the Assembly on Monday the 7th to place it on the
On the August 12th
August
date.
12th? ballot?
That's right, that's what it amounts
Does
to.
that mean that reapportionment then appears on the same ballot?
The reapportionment would appear on the same ballot, but I think it's critical to get it out before a great deal of organization opposing it goes on.
Question.
Wait a minute. Reapportionment on the same ballot.
Yes, it puts it back to our original proposal of
We
having
made
it
this
on the same.
policy decision as a commission of the whole when we had everyone present, and we particularly set it at that time so that everyone would have a chance to vote on that. And I really object to reconsidering something that we purposely did as a commission of the whole.
Question on the motion? Questions called. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Those opposed?
No.
The noes have it. Are there any persons here, any other commissioner comments? Are there any persons here to be heard who are not on the agenda? Mr. Rose?
Chairman, I'd like to make a suggestion for what's worth. I've listened to the plans for advertising, and I certainly agree with all that was said. I think perhaps that something was omitted. For example, I didn't hear any mention of the public broadcasting station, which I think would be an excellent idea for use. I think that the comment that was made that no one or nearly no one will go through 4 pages of newsprint to read the whole thing is largely true. Even interested persons. I didn't go through the whole thing in one sitting for sure. It's heavy stuff, and I don't think that you can sell in any 1-hour program present the whole thing. I would think that as cutting it up into smaller sections of perhaps 15-minute programs discussing the executive in one, the legislative in another, the administrative agencies, the ombudsman problem, the Eagle River problem, discussing different aspects in short programs that people can absorb and respond to. I think would be much more informative, and that you'd get a great deal more listening audience. But that the progression can be announced. And there will be, and I'm sure that the PBS system would be very happy to have such a progression of short programs which would present the entire picture. The person who is interested particularly in one aspect could listen to that one program. Those who want to listen to the whole thing could take it in small doses and absorb it and digest it. This is not instead of anything that's been proposed, but in addition to. I think that some of these programs might be also acceptable to the commercial stations who may well want to rerun them. And it wouldn't be wasted just for one purpose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose. I think your points are well taken. Are there any other persons here to be heard who are not on the agenda? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much.
You want to